Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Town of Grimsby Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, May 17th, 2021 to order. First off, is there any pecuniary interests? Seeing none, I have just before we do approval of the agenda, I have a couple of announcements. Next Monday, May 24th, residents in Grimsby and across Canada will celebrate Victoria Day. For many, this long weekend is the official start for summer activities and events. While our traditional Victoria Day plans may look different than years previous, I hope that all our residents continue to celebrate safely and create new traditions and share special memories with their immediate family. I'm also excited to share in follow-up to last year's successful event, we will once again be hosting a virtual Mayor's Information Night on June 24th from 6:30 to 8:30, pending COVID-19 restrictions. Residents who wish to submit a question to me will be able to do so through the Let's Talk Grimsby website starting this Thursday, May 20th. Details regarding the live stream event will be posted closer to the meeting date. I look forward to answering your questions and seeing you all virtually on June 24th. Up next, we have approval of the agenda.
Mayor Jordan, if I might interrupt, there's a couple of items on the agenda that are have reappeared. They're under notice of motion.
Councillor Frake's hands up. Councillor Frake.
I thought we were going to follow protocol and put our hands up when we needed to talk.
Yes, yeah, and that's noted.
Anyways, if it's okay with you, Mayor Jordan, I'd like to refer to 12.A and B. I'd like to defer those two notice of motions till the following meeting.
All right.
I'll second that. I'll second that, Mayor Jordan.
Yeah.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
If I do believe those items are reconsideration of a matter, in order to have a reconsideration of a matter, in order to put the motion on the floor, they would have had to have voted in the direction that declares them a reconsideration.
I'm ruling that I don't believe they're a reconsideration.
Then I'd like to challenge your ruling, please.
Point of clarification, Mayor, would this be something that the clerk would give us a better understanding of what a reconsideration is with respect to an agenda item? Because it wasn't a motion, it was an agenda that's already passed that we can't reconsider. It's done, and reconsiderations are for things that are that can be undone or that you can go back to in time. So can the clerk just maybe clarify even whether we should be doing this challenge?
Point of order. I do believe it's the chair's call.
Yes, well, I'll read section 37 of Robert's Rules, 12th edition. Reconsideration. Well, first off, I'll start off with a reconsideration. The town procedural bylaw is silent on the definition of reconsideration, causing it to be misused and misunderstood by council. Robert's Rules provides a clear definition. Definition of reconsideration, section 37 of Robert's Rules, the 12th edition, section 37(1), reconsider. A motion of American origin enables a majority in an assembly with a limited time and without notice to bring back for further consideration a motion that has already been voted on. The motion to reconsider can in general be applied to a vote that either adopted or rejected a motion, and it proposes no specific change in the decision, but simply the original question be reopened. Third, if the motion to reconsider is adopted, the effect is to the extent practicable and with certain exceptions to place before the assembly again in the question on which the vote has been reconsidered in the exact position it occupied the moment before it was voted on originally. The original vote thus canceled, and before any new vote on this is taken, the question is again open up to debate, amendment, or any other action appropriate in the case. And the reason this is not a reconsideration, it was the actual notice of motion was never voted on.
Mayor, I asked for a challenge of your ruling on a reconsideration. You can deny or not, and then put it to a vote.
Yeah. I will overrule on your point of order, and I will say that the notices of motion that were deleted from the May 3rd meeting were deleted from the May 3rd meeting. They were not deleted from the May 17th meeting. They were never voted on. The only vote that took place was voting whether to delete a notice of motion. The notice of motion was not voted on. Thank you. Yeah. So the movers, Councillor Ritchie.
I'll second it.
So moved by Councillor Ritchie, second by Councillor Dunstall, resolved that the following matters be deemed a reconsideration. Notice of motion on cost of HR review and notice of motion on signing officers. Any discussion, Councillor Sharp?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jordan. So I've taken some time to talk to the clerk and to look at our procedural bylaw. And in our procedural bylaw, and when it comes to approving agendas, it says that we can do two things. We can delete an item from the agenda, and we can defer an item from the agenda. And so at our past meeting on May 3rd, we deleted these two items, and we didn't defer them. And so to defer them now would be contrary to the motion that we've already passed. And if we had intended to defer the motions on May 3rd, then we would have made a motion to defer the motions on May 3rd, but we made a motion to delete the motions on May 3rd. And so what we're doing here is we're reopening the motion to delete the items, and we're changing it to defer the items. And they're in the same sentence of the procedural bylaw, and they're different things. They have different meaning. And so this is a reconsideration of the motion on May 3rd to delete these items from the agenda. These items, so for example, the one notice here is with regards to legal opinion on signing authorities. We already had legal opinion on that authority, on those authorities. And we also already passed the motion. The bank's okay with it. The lawyer's okay with it. Council approved it. It's done. Right? And so we removed it from the agenda because it's not something that we want to debate again. That has already happened, come and gone. And you know what, I'm not going to go into the other motion, but this is a reconsideration. Previous.
Mr. Mayor, point of order. As per our procedural bylaws, after you hear that I've challenged your reconsideration, you decide on the matter and a vote occurs whether it's a reconsideration or not. This is non-debatable.
Apologies.
I'm going to defer to the clerk on that because I've been given different information. The clerk has ruled because it's a subsequent meeting, debate is allowed. Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I would suggest that the clerk maybe read the May 3rd, 2021 minutes, actually, where it states that the agenda be approved with the deletion of the items. I think the only way to permanently remove something from an agenda for it not to ever be brought forward again is to treat it as a objection to the consideration of a question under Robert's rules. And that's in section 26, and that requires 2/3 to vote on. Otherwise, there's nothing that prevents someone from bringing something new or bringing it back to the agenda. And it isn't a reconsideration in my mind because you can't go back and reopen an agenda item that's already passed, where other things that can still be, and that's very clear on a reconsideration, it has to be something that hasn't already happened or been done and cannot be undone. And that can't be undone. That agenda is done from May 3rd. So I think that if the intent is from Councillor Ritchie that these items be removed entirely from any future agendas, that then it has to be treated as an objection to the consideration of a question under section 26 of Robert's rules, where it says the purpose of an objection to the consideration of a question is to enable the assembly to avoid a particular original main motion altogether when it believes it would be strongly undesirable for the motion even to come before the assembly. And the effect of that objection is if it's sustained, the main motion is then dismissed for that session. It cannot be renewed during the same session. And if the objection is not sustained, consideration of the main motion proceeds. So I think the clerk might need to provide guidance on that, because I think that our PBL is silent on that, and there's nothing saying we can't continue to bring back an agenda item. I'm really concerned with this discussion because it raises fear of bringing a notice of motion forward that the community asks us to do, when a majority can just say, no, you can't discuss that. I just don't like it, or I don't want it on the agenda. And I think we don't have a way to control that. And I think there has to be a democratic process that allows councillors to debate and discuss things, which is through the motion, not through the agenda. So I think this should be treated as an objection to the consideration of a question if Councillor Ritchie is looking at having it forever removed. And maybe the clerk can clarify that.
Sarah?
So procedurally and in support of our legal, the view was that if there was a motion to delete and there was a proper mover and seconder and a majority vote, to bring the same matter back on a future agenda would be a reconsideration, because the rationale was that that council gave the consideration of the matter by deleting it.
So I don't see that council gave consideration of the matter. Sorry, clerk. They only decided whether the item should be on the agenda. There was no consideration of the motion itself.
And that clarification could be done through majority of vote of council.
I'm just unclear on that. Thank you.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess what concerns me most about this discussion is that we're having all this discussion about procedure when it just seems to me like some councillors are trying to not allow the public to hear information that they want to hear. And to me, that's just not right. And I don't understand why some councillors are trying to block this. And it appears to me that that all this discussion around procedure is just a smokescreen to try and hide the information that the public wants to hear about, and that is just improper. And so I just wanted to make that statement, and that I think these items should be discussed. Thank you.
Councillor Frake.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I agree with Councillor Vardy. I think that we're stifling the democratic process. The more we fight about this, the more we disagree with it, the more that the general public thinks there is something hidden. So if we want to continue to do that, then nobody wins here. I mean, you're just stifling debate on something that is sensitive, that is controversial, that needs to be clarified. We need to put some closure to it, and we're just not giving any democratic process to this. Yes, we can quote procedures, and Councillor Ritchie there, he's got his rule book out, and he'll just go on and on forever and ever and ever. But instead of trying to find a way to get this on the table so we can discuss it, no, that's not what he wants to do. He just wants to stifle it, hide it under the table so that it just goes away. Sorry, that's not the way we work. We're responsible to the people. The people want to hear what's going on, and I think that's what we need to do. So if we're fighting, we're not fighting ourselves, we're fighting the democratic process, and we're fighting our own constituents here who want to know. So I think we need to put this out there, and I think we need to get it discussed, and we need to find the best way forward to do it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, Your Worship. I completely disagree with Councillor Vardy and Councillor Frake. As Councillor Sharp had already said, we had a discussion on the signing officers. It's been well debated. And so the public has heard that. Doing an HR review, it's just not the right time to be doing anything like that. And I don't think there's anything to find, because I don't think there's anything to hide. So I think we're just spinning our wheels, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, and staff have already had struggles working just to do the job well, let alone having a costly HR review. So I was surprised to see it back on the agenda. It was defeated. It was deleted from the previous committee of the whole agenda. We've got a legal ruling here that it's a reconsideration, and I don't want to debate it. I'd just like to vote on it. Thank you.
Councillor Cadwell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jordan. I have to agree that the items that were discussed in the past, and personally myself, I'm satisfied with the information that was given from the report from staff with legal's advice to it all. And so again, with my research that I've been doing, this is a reconsideration. And that's just my comments right now. Thank you.
Councillor Bain.
I have to say, I do agree with every councillor in parts anyways. Councillor Dunstall and Councillor Cadwell made it very clear, and I agree with them. We've debated this already. There's no point in carrying it on. Like, we're just trying to make it look somebody bad. And unfortunately, I don't appreciate some councillors pointing at other councillors and saying that they're that they're being bad, they're hiding stuff. And I'm glad to see, that's the part I do agree with Councillor Vardy and Councillor Freak. I'm really glad to hear that they're open to having information released to the public, because far too much stuff has been hidden from the public, in my opinion anyways. So I'm just glad to hear that they're open to that. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad to hear from the clerk a little bit of a legal opinion that was shared. And when we talk about hiding information, there was emails that went around the last little bit, and it was clear that our legal for the town gave a legal opinion on some of this matter that I asked for several times. And I thought that it was very important to get this legal opinion, because this legal opinion is from our lawyer. So it's town property, and it may assist in making tonight's decision. Yet the mayor will not share these emails or this information. So keeping the information to himself, this is not transparent. And you know what? And when we looked at transparency or democratic process, not sharing information is not a democratic process.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to address something that Councillor Dunstall said when he referred to this as a costly HR review. What I believe the motion is requesting is, what did it cost for these recent firings? I mean, that's the main thrust of that. That doesn't cost, that's not costly to find out. That's information that the town has and the people want to hear about it. The second matter, the second notice of motion about signing authorities, Councillor Bothwell has already pointed out that there are discrepancies in the information that's been provided. So the matter is not finished, it's not closed. And I've heard from many residents who want to know what exactly is going on in both of these areas. So I would just like to say that, one, it's not going to cost any money to do number one. As a matter of fact, I bet it would take half an hour of somebody to put that information together. And the second matter is the information that we've received with respect to signing authorities has not been correct. There have been inaccuracies and the clarifications that were inaccurate. And we need to sort this matter out and yes, move forward. But until we sort the matter out, we can't move forward. So I just like to say these matters aren't finished by any means. Thank you.
Councillor Frake.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. Yes, Councillor Dunstall, I mean, you may think that we have nothing to hide. And fine, maybe there isn't anything to hide. But if that's the case, let's just open this up, discuss it, get it out there and have it and put it behind us. We can't just keep fighting about this thing because, I mean, I think we need, the public are asking for it. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see a more detailed report on all these things that happened over that period of time. And I think I'm entitled to it. I think my constituents are entitled to it. I think all of your constituents are entitled to it. So if there's nothing to hide, fine. Let's show them we have nothing to hide, open it up and talk about it and have it out there. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I think that I think we all have the best interest of the town at heart. So let's show them that we do have that. Let's do it. So I know, here we go again. So anyway, I'll stop there, Mayor Jordan. Thank you.
Can we call the question?
Councillor Sharp.
Can we call the question, Mayor?
Just a second, I have the floor.
I think we've gone around a couple times.
Sorry, Councillor Bothwell, please. The mayor gave me the floor. Please wait. Thank you, Mayor Jordan. And Councillor Frake has just made a comment that he thinks he's entitled to this information in this motion. And the motion asks for outline the costs of the staffing changes, including costs of severances, salary increases, new hire salaries.
Point of order, Mayor, we're not to debate the notices of motion. We're only supposed to debate the reconsideration in front of us, not the actual notices of motion or the merits or history on the notices of motion.
Yes, you're quite
Another
correct.
point of order, Mr. Mayor, is every other councillor's talked about the facts. Councillor Ferry, Councillor Vardy, Councillor Dunstall, Councillor Caldwell. Why is it suddenly, when it comes to Councillor Sharp, that he's going to be shut down?
Because that was the first point of order raised.
Well, I just raised one too.
Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't talking about specifics. I was talking about general.
So in our procedural, in our code of conduct, it says that a member shall only be entitled to have access to information that is relevant to his or her role as a member of council. Otherwise, he or she shall have the same rights to information as any member of the public. And so when it comes to, we gave some objectives to our CAO when we hired him, and we asked him for a 60-day update on those objectives. And on November 4th, 2019.
Again, Mayor, it's way off track. Way off track.
Councillor Sharp, you're continually going off track, and you need to stay on track.
Okay, so this information that the councillors are requesting is administrative. It is confidential. And it is not a part of it's an administrative function done by staff. It's not something that council has to decide on. Council approved a budget for these staff changes in November of 2019. And that motion was moved by Councillor Freak and seconded by Councillor Vardy. And it was passed, to my memory, unanimously. And so at this point, our staff is carrying out our council's directive, and council doesn't need to get in and say, okay, how much does each person make, and how much were there any salary increases, and how much, and
Just a
were there
point of
any?
clarification.
Those are administrative.
Point of clarification, please, Mr. Mayor.
As long as it's an actual point of clarification, Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor Vardy.
Please don't let her
The money
debate
that
in
was
my.
approved in
speak over me.
2019
Councillor Sharp, that's your first warning.
was spent. The money approved in 2019 was spent in 2019. The monies that Councillor Sharp is referring to have never been disclosed, debated on,
Mr. Mayor, I thought
discussed.
we're not debating these things. It's about the reconsideration.
Okay.
Well,
I'm okay.
Councillor
Let's just
Sharp
vote.
brought it up, and
Okay, then can we call the
Councillor
question?
Sharp, anything that affects our bottom line is council's business. So the question's been called.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. You also said you're going to follow the quorum. Councillor Bothwell did not have her hand up to call the question. There's two other hands up.
I understood that you could interrupt at any time. Sorry, Councillor Ritchie.
Yes, the question can be called at any time
question
after the
at any
first
time.
round of voting. So the question has been called. All right, so we have mover, Councillor Bothwell. Seconder for calling the question, Councillor Frake. Moved by Councillor Bothwell, second by Councillor Frake. Resolved that the matter on reconsideration in regards to agenda item 12A and 12B be called to question. And it's a recorded vote.
Sir Bothwell,
Could you clarify what we're voting on, please?
that we're calling the question on the motion that states resolve that the following matters is deemed a reconsideration, not notice of motion on cost of HR review and notice of motion on signing officers.
No.
Clarity, point of clarity before she
Could I have
votes.
a point of clarification, please?
I thought we were voting on just
The ruling of
call
the,
the question or whether.
Just to
we're-
call, yeah, just to call the question, yeah, so we can
Yes.
vote on that motion.
It's on call the question.
okay, so if we're just calling the question, then I'm a yes.
Okay. Councillor Dunstall,
I'm a no.
Councillor Frake,
I'm a yes.
Councillor Catwell,
Nope.
Councillor Ritchie,
No.
Councillor Sharp,
Yes.
Councillor Vane,
No,
Councillor Vardy,
Yes.
Mayor Jordan.
Yes.
As this requires 2/3 is defeated.
Councillor Ritchie.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if you allow, I do believe Councillor Dunstall was before me.
Sure, I'm just going by my screen. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Just a point of clarification, because I just want to make sure the public is aware that we went into a closed session some time ago, and our CAO gave us a very thorough PowerPoint presentation explaining everything that he was going to do and that what the costs were. So we've already seen the
Point
costs.
of order again, Mayor. We're
Yes,
dealing
Councillor
with-
Dunstall, you need to just stick to the reconsideration, not talking about closed sessions.
I'm not talking about, well. All right. I'm done.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I keep on hearing comments that hiding things from the public and so forth. Yet, when I asked in the emails this weekend about these matters, we were clearly told there was a legal opinion matter that the residents of this town paid for. And I asked for that legal opinion several times, and it's never been given to any of us. So I really asked the question, what is being hid here? So with
nothing's
this right
being
now,
hid.
in this, as I speak, I am putting a formal information request on this legal opinion as well. I want it clear, just like what Bothwell did, Councilor Bothwell did a few weeks ago with her information request.
Point of order, I think you should apologize to Councillor Bothwell for referencing her in that way.
That was not a negative way. I said she did it last week, so I'm doing the exact same
You
thing.
called her Bothwell. That is
I
rude.
said apologize for. I
So
said
please
Councilor Bothwell.
apologize.
Yes.
Please apologize.
So
I'll second that motion for information request.
yeah, so I do.
Mayor Jordan? Mayor Jordan, can we have that motion right now?
You're welcome. Councillor Ritchie actually demanded for,
Well, like I said, I
something.
don't think there was a motion before, and we got that legal bill, and there's another legal bill, and I don't think there was a motion for that information request at that time. It was, as I remember at the council minutes, it was it's non-debatable, is what it was, because of correcting the minutes. So, with that being said,
yeah, I'm not sure what you're talking about right now, but
Councilor Bothwell's information request. So back on topic, I apologize for getting off topic. Like I said, so we have a legal opinion out there that would tremendously assist with this decision right now. And it's being kept from us as a council.
well, it's certainly not being kept from you. It's
You've
just
never shared it, and it's not, Mayor Jordan, if it's a debate, please.
I'm not debating. I'm just saying I absolutely have not shared it yet.
Thank you.
And John Maskeren and myself have not finished conversing about it as well. And I was unable to contact him today. We essentially missed each other and left each other voicemails. So I was unable to follow up on it today.
It's a great answer, Mr. Mayor. But again,
yeah, well, it's the truth. So
work on this.
Point of order. That's
Councillor Ritchie, I'm
from Councillor Ritchie. Please
No,
apologize.
Mayor
to the
Jordan. Mayor Jordan is participating in a debate with me. I have the right
You
to.
just said that's a grade A comment. That is rude.
I think
Point of order. Please apologize, Councillor.
okay. Everyone on council now.
This meeting is really
The only
unacceptable.
Councillor Vardy, you need to stop right now, and we need no crosstalk. I'm not debating Councillor Ritchie. I'm merely stating a fact. So
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Then, if you stay in the facts, then I guess that if we don't have the legal opinion formalized, then I would have thought that you would have removed this from the agenda until you do.
and that's why I was trying to defer it.
Sorry,
not key.
a point of order on Councillor Ritchie's statement. Sorry, Councillor Ritchie. We did receive, the clerk just did mention the legal opinion. When I asked about the reconsideration, she mentioned that she had received the legal opinion from Maskeren on it being deemed a reconsideration. So I think we have heard that from the clerk. Did you not hear what I heard?
Again, thank you, Councillor Bothwell. We just heard that like 3 minutes ago.
But you did hear that from the clerk as well.
Oh,
So she
so-
did disclose.
So you're correct. So we just
the
heard
legal opinion
from our
was.
legal opinion that this is a reconsideration of a matter. Thank you. We'll have the vote then. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Ritchie, second by Councillor Dunstall. Resolved that the following matters be deemed a reconsideration. Notice of motion on cost of HR review and notice of motion on signing officers. Recorded vote.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just get a point of clarity. So if we vote yes, we are saying it is a reconsideration, correct?
Yes, even though the opinion hasn't been completely decided yet.
Councillor Bothwell,
No.
Councillor Dunstall,
Yes.
Councillor Frake,
No.
Councillor Cadwell,
Yes.
Councillor Ritchie,
Yes.
Councillor Sharp,
Yes.
Councillor Vane,
Yes.
Councillor Vardy,
No.
Mayor Jordan,
No.
that's carried.
Yes. Moved by Councillor Frick, second by Councillor Vardy. Resolve the agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting of May 17th, 2021 be approved as amended. Recorded
Can you
vote.
just confirm? I just have a question, Mayor Jordan.
Yes.
Can you
Councillor
just
Sharp?
confirm the amendment? Can you just confirm the amendment was to remove those two items?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Bothwell,
Sorry, can we have a point of clarity? So this motion is to remove those items again?
No, it's to approve it with the items removed as amended.
Sorry, point of order. Did last meeting we had to vote on deleting the items individually, or how are we doing this, clerk? Because there's been no actual motion to delete the individual items.
through you, Mr. Mayor, the matters were deemed a reconsideration. So if the notice of motion wants, if councillors want the notice of motion to be included in the agenda, it would need a 2/3 vote.
And to be moved by someone who voted in the majority.
Councillor Bothwell?
We're voting just on the agenda now with those items removed, correct?
Can I have a point of clarification, please?
Yes, Councillor Vardy?
If we find that the clerk has erred in her judgment, no offense to you, Sarah, how would we be able to approach this matter again if there's been a procedural error?
Sarah?
So ultimately, any procedures and policies, anything, or bylaw is through the majority of council. So council can change the decisions, right? So, I mean, council doesn't have to accept right now what is being recommended by legal or such, right? It is through the majority of council at the end of the day.
But
It is for me to make the decision on.
but you've made an interpretation, and based on that interpretation, we've had a vote. If we find that your interpretation was incorrect, that this wasn't a reconsideration, what then? What is our recourse?
Point of order, Mayor Jordan.
No, please don't interrupt me.
When a point of
Councillor
order is
Ritchie,
called, the mayor
please.
is supposed to acknowledge the point
Yes,
of order.
so the point of order is overruled.
The point of order is overruled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because let's Councillor, why are you interrupting Councillor
Because
Vardy?
she's assuming that the clerk made a decision that was based upon a legal opinion. It was a legal opinion that she's writing, and she's actually, in my opinion, she's attacking our clerk in making.
I'm not attacking anyone. I am asking the clerk about a procedure.
You
And I
also
take
said that she made a
offense-
decision.
I take offense at your comments, Councillor Ritchie. That is inappropriate.
And I
and
take
that's
offense
not the
that
first
you
time.
attacked the clerk.
I did not attack the clerk. I asked her
Mayor, can we have
if
a
she
ruling on
gave
that,
an,
please?
if she
Yeah.
gave an incorrect.
Sarah, do you feel
interpretation,
attacked?
what would be the procedure? And I said right off the top, no offense to you, Sarah. So
Yes.
I don't
yes.
think she feels attacked. And I would really
It was
appreciate
not her
Councillor
opinion.
Ritchie, if you would refrain from constantly interrupting me. It's such a tiresome.
Order is that it's not her opinion. You spoke incorrectly.
Oh,
It
come
was
on.
illegal.
I did not. Mayor Jordan, may I have the floor?
Yes. Yes,
So,
Councillor Vardy.
so Sarah, if you could advise me as to if you make an interpretation in your role as clerk, and then we subsequently vote on this as we have, that it's a reconsideration, what would be the procedure if we were to find out subsequent to this meeting that your interpretation may not have been correct. What is our recourse as a council to introduce these notice of motions? And I think it's very important to raise that because the
Call point of order. The clerk has already answered the question and we're just
No,
hearing
she
it again.
hasn't.
Yes, she has. I heard her answer the question
No, I
quite clearly.
didn't.
I haven't heard it yet.
I haven't heard it.
So what we're ruling is effectively, if there's more information that comes to the light on this, we can look at it again. So we'll leave it at that.
Thank you. That answers the question.
All right, we're on a recorded vote now.
Can you please repeat what we're voting on, Mr. Mayor? Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Frake, second by Councillor Vardy. Resolve the agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting of May 17th, 2021 be approved as amended. Recorded vote.
Councillor Bothwell,
No,
Councillor Dunstall,
I'm a yes, but can I have some clarification on the agenda? If a majority votes it down, is this meeting over tonight? If we don't approve the agenda, does that qualify as an adjournment? Just a point of clarification.
sorry, point of clarification, can we just bring an amended motion then to the approval of the agenda to?
I don't understand.
Yeah, if the agenda is not approved, we still go on with an unapproved agenda. There has to be a motion to adjourn.
Thank you for the clarification. So I'm a yes.
Councillor Frake,
No.
Councillor Cadwell,
Yes.
Councillor Ritchie,
Yes.
Councillor Sharp,
Yes.
Councillor Vane,
Yes.
Councillor Vardy,
No.
Mayor Jordan,
No.
that's carried.
All right, we move to number 6, regional councillor update. Councillor Furtick, good evening. Sorry for the delay.
Good evening, Mayor, and good evening, Council. I'm just going to be brief on some of these items because particularly the item to deal with the planning option. It's very, very, very detailed, and we could be here all night debating it. But the first thing I want to tell Council and particularly the public that Toyota, and I'm talking in reference to the on-demand transit NRT. Toyota Canada has issued a vehicle recall, which impacted our NRT on-demand fleet. The recall, unfortunately, pertained to a fuel pump on particular VIN numbers, and as a result, 7 of our vehicles have been temporarily removed from service effective the 14th of May, which was 2 days ago. The timeline on the required repairs is expected to be 2 to 3 weeks. So during this time, we just ask that the riders be very, very patient, and they're looking, and they have, I believe, got some replacement vehicles in order to continually go forward with the NRT on demand. So just a little thing from the NRT. The Waste Management gave us a report at Public Works last week, and we have a decrease in our garbage, believe it or not, by the amount of 15.7%. We have had an increase in the organics by 34%, and the recycling has increased by 11.9%. This is fantastic, and we thank all of the residents of Niagara for participating and showing that, in fact, this every second week of garbage pickup has really increased our organics and recycling. So I want to pass on to you to pass on to your constituents that we really, really appreciate that kind of response. And that's in the first 6 months. So let's hope that it continues and goes a little bit further. The biggest thing that we had just the other day was planning in reference to the official plan. There was 3 or 4 options that were discussed, and the option of 3C, I have voted for 3C, and of course we're having it's going to council on Thursday, so we'll be looking for more support. And the reason 3C is the best because it covers all of the areas that particularly is going to take us for the next 50 years. This official plan hasn't been updated. It's been updated here and there, but this official plan that's coming forward that's due in 2022, this official plan gives us longevity in for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Let's hope it's not 50 years before they do it again. Having said that, some of the concerns that I did have, and I still will take forward on Thursday, is that I want the municipalities to have the option of looking at the mapping. There were some options where the municipality didn't do the mapping, that they considered the mapping would come from the province and of course strictly from the region. I don't agree with that. And I hope that you don't agree with that, simply because we need the mapping to be done by our staff, which includes the urban boundaries, not only the rural boundaries within Grimsby, but the urban boundaries, in case there is mapping issues. Of course, there's the creek, there's things like that. We want to make sure that it's been taken care of in the mapping. So the other thing is that I want to make sure that enough information comes back to the municipalities so that the municipalities have a say in many different items. And as I say, I don't want to get into a whole lot of detailing of the option 3C, other than it is the best of it all. And we should be given the best of it all, simply because we're protecting the environment. We have to protect the environment for our kids and our grandkids. And this is the time in order to do that. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to ask Mayor Jordan. He's the expert when it comes to environment and that sort of thing. I mean, that's what that's where his certifications come from. So I'm going to let him expand a little bit more if he wishes, and then I'll open for questions. Thank you, Mayor Jordan.
Thank you, Councillor Furtick. Just following with option 3C, it's certainly the best option for the environment, and it's something where it puts the environment on a much more level playing field with development. Some of the other options, they put development before environment, and we have lots of developers, but we only have one environment, and the environment is under pressure in Niagara. We have one of the lowest forest covers of any region in Ontario. And we certainly need option 3C to allow for more extensive reforestation and more extensive saving and expanding of dedicated wetlands. And we are in the middle of the Carolinian forest, so we have a sensitive ecosystem already. So option 3C is really it's the best option for residents of Niagara and the environment. Councillor Bothwell?
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I've been following this quite closely and posting some stuff on my Facebook page. Liz Benyon recently did a presentation, and thank you, Councillor Furtich, for your support of 3C. Recently made a presentation to the region when they were discussing the natural heritage systems, and in her presentation, she quotes that Environment Canada says 30% forest cover is the minimum forest cover threshold, and 40% will support the potential species and richness. We only in Niagara have 17.5% forest cover, and many large areas, including Grimsby, Lincoln, St. Catharines, Niagara Lake, have less than 14%. So we're talking about climate change impacts. There's a couple municipalities who are declaring climate change emergencies, but yet we're not seeing the support from them for this 3C. What is 3C? 3C provides linkages within the urban boundary to the woodlands and the natural heritage systems to tie them, interconnect them, and create a little bit of a buffer from that development. So it focuses on the little bit we have left within the urban boundary of natural heritage features. And what it does is it includes those supporting features and the small linkages between them all up the escarpment and all through the town of Grimsby and within the settlement areas, and creates minimum buffers from those natural heritage features. So it's actually saying you can't build within 15 meters or whatever of this stream or this corridor, and then we look at protecting that area with environmental features. So it's really, really critical. And what was sad when I was reading the recent land needs assessment and growth allocations in the regional official plan, the reports they just released on that, their land needs assessment for the designated greenfield areas, which is outside the urban area. It's the area that we haven't developed on yet. They're using the 3B model already. And in that report, it says this is all based on the 3B. So it's almost like the region has come to a predetermined conclusion when they've already built their growth projections on the 3B model for the designated greenfield areas. So I have a real concern, and I hope that our councillors take that back to the region, that there shouldn't be that predetermined outcome. 3C, as our councillors are saying, for our future generations, protects that little bit of green space and natural heritage we have left from the pressures of development right up to the border. You can see it down here at Grimsby on the Lake. When the Lake House development was built, they built right up to the creek. They actually went into the creek and did the revetment walls into the creek area. And that's a key tributary up the escarpment. So we have to protect a buffer area from those key tributaries, those natural heritage features, and that's what this does. So I appreciate the mayor and Councillor Furtich's advocacy, and I hope that that can reach out to the other councillors that are going to be voting on Thursday, because it has to be a strong voice in the community. I'm hearing it loud and clear. We've got to send that message, because our kids and our towns need to keep as much of that canopy and environmental protection as we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I didn't want to get into a lot of the seriousness, but thank you very much for your explanation. If there's no more questions, I'll hang up.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentation, Councillor Furtick.
Thank you, Mayor.
Up next, we move to consent agenda. Report FIN. Councillor Bothwell.
Can I lift 7.1A and 7.1B, please?
All right. So we just need a mover and seconder for the other two items on consent. Councillor Frake, Councillor Vardy. Moved by Councillor Frake, second by Councillor Vardy. Resolved that the Committee of the Whole hereby approves the following items and the various consent items be approved on the recommendation as contained therein. TC 21-03 High School Bursaries, PA 2121 Planning Touchpoint. All in favor? That's carried. So we got it. All right. Now we move to report 8.1A, council structure and ward boundary review. Welcome, John. Is John here? Okay. I'll say welcome when he actually gets in the room. Welcome, John. Nice to see you again. And Olivia, nice to see you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good to see all of you. We're very happy tonight to be able to present to you our report on ward boundary options and council structure. Olivia is going to be sharing in the presentation of the report. To facilitate the speedier presentation, we have prepared some slides which will show you there is absolutely no new content in the slides, but it provides a sort of best of some of the content from the report. We've been asked to try and hold our initial presentation to within 15 minutes. And so we've prepared this to try and expedite our ability to move through the material promptly for you. So if it's okay, Madam Clerk, I will just share the screen. While I'm waiting for the screen sharing to be disabled, I should just say it really wouldn't be appropriate to present this report without acknowledging the participation of the staff who were particularly helpful in the presentation, in the creation of helping us put together the options. But also, I think most members of council got to see the community meetings, the consultation sessions, and the terrific contribution that many members of the public made in participating. It wasn't that their contribution was so great in numbers, because we would have loved to have had more people, but honestly, the dedicated participation of those who did show up in a very dark time of the winter, it makes me smile. And at the last meeting, we indicated that we would faithfully make sure that we reported on all of the different suggestions that they made to us in terms of trying to make improvements to our first 6 models. And we did that. And I just wanted to say we really valued the input that we got from the public. And you'll see in our report, if they suggested, hey, did you try this? Then the answer is, yeah, we did. And sometimes it worked better than others, but you'll often see them reflected. Now I'm getting a sign that says you can control Donna Del Vecchio's screen. So let's see if that's true. Yep, it is. Excellent. I'll just have to get, okay, perfect. So I'll dispense with most of the preliminaries. I think you're all very, very well, but just really for the record, it was on Monday, December the 7th that you approved the review of the ward boundaries and council composition. And you made it very clear that we were to look at the 5 parameters that were set out. And you've all heard us do the presentation on what effective representation is. And I suspect that you could, members of council, most of you recited, having many of you heard me give it at least 5 times already. So we won't read through that again, but what's critical is that all of the evaluations are where we say something is preferable. In every case, we mean having regard to the terms of reference and the overriding principle of effective representation. There's no judgments in this document that do not come out of that place. The other thing that's important to remember is that we were asked to think in terms of a 10-year horizon. And so they were to be in place for 2022 and to exist until 2030. You'll recall that the first phase saw us take a number of procedural steps to seek input of various sorts, and they're set out on the left-hand side of the page. In our interim report, we proposed a number of options in regard to council structure and tried to narrow the options. And the key findings and recommendations are as set out on the right-hand side of the page. We concluded at that time that really your existing ward boundaries didn't deliver effective representation anymore, predominantly because of the mathematical issues that put them out of relative parity with one another. But also because, there was a lot of criticism that we heard that they weren't delivering adequate representation to the escarpment area too. And that, along with several other factors, were things that we learned from the first round, which helped inform how we would apply the principles of effective representation to the remainder of our work. So in phase 3, we developed a number of ward options and we presented 6 to the public. And as you can see, those 6 have multiplied into the many options that are before you. A sort of a handy trick when you're looking at them is the original options were numbered 1 to 6, and any of the A class or B class are typically improvements on the basic options that were typically suggested by participants through the process, or through our own work when we would twig to things from listening to people. But as you'll see, actually I'm going to jump to the next slide. The most important thing, and Olivia's going to take over from me in just a second, that we came to at the end of the last session was that we were to present to you options that could either accommodate a council of 9 or a council of 7, and also options that were either based on 1 per ward or 2 per ward. We were not to present options unless it was absolutely necessary for mathematical reasons that would lead to uneven distributions of wards. So, that could be as simple as 1 ward of 3 and 1 of 1 to try and achieve balance in elected representation, if mathematical representation couldn't be achieved sensibly. And we did find through our work that it wasn't necessary for us because the math was working out favorably enough with 2 per ward and 1 per ward. So we set out to develop proposals that would deliver you options that would work with councils of 9 or councils of 7 at 2 wards or 1 wards. And so you see set out there in that chart the various range of options. And I'll pass it over to you, Olivia.
Yeah, so as John mentioned, we have a number of ward configurations to look at. And there were several factors that we had to consider as primary toggle points when we were developing those. Oh, do you want to just go back one? Sorry.
Sure.
Just to make the point that the first factor is the number of councillors, wards, and councillors per ward. And just to make the point that they can and they cannot be considered independently because they are not all they can't all be independently toggled and still result in permutations that would actually make sense. So the main outcome there being if council decides to reduce its number and wishes to stay with either 1 or 2 councillors elected per ward, it's limited to 3 or 6 ward options. And also if it maintains its current size of 9, it's limited to options that have 4 or 8 wards. So there's not an infinite number of possible permutations across these 2 scales that we've looked at. So next slide, please. So the second major factor we had to look into was the future population trends. And in Grimsby, they're incredibly relevant because of the uneven distribution of growth across Grimsby, primarily how much growth has happened in the Northwest on Grimsby and the Lake and how much more is projected to grow in the same area. So this kind of leads to two main outcomes just based on the major density of growth in Grimsby and the Lake area. The first being that whatever ward includes Grimsby and the Lake will necessarily be smaller than a lot of the other wards because of the high density in the area. And this is true, even more true the greater the number of wards that we're looking at. So in 8 ward options where average ward size is quite small, the ward around Grimsby and the Lake will be quite small as well. The other implication is the fifth wheel development site, which you can see is the big blue circle there on the map. Because of the large number of people projected to move in just on that side of the highway exit, in a lot of cases, especially 6 and 8 ward options, it's necessary mathematically to separate the Grimsby and the Lake area, even though we did in most cases make a concerted effort to keep that community together as one of a community of interest. However, because of the math in the area, in smaller wards, it has to be separated. And in fact, you'll find even in some of the 4 ward options we looked at, it greatly improves the math to remove the fifth wheel option from the rest of Grimsby and the Lake, or the fifth wheel site from Grimsby and the Lake, I should say. So as you can see, these are kind of the two options, types of configurations for the fifth wheel site we show, those that include it with Grimsby and the Lake on the right and those that have it separated on the left. Next slide, please. Oops, there's a little whoopsie on this slide, but basically this slide is about looking at how the rural escarpment will achieve effective representation. In particular, we heard 3 main things about this community. One, that it is a community of interest with specific interests and concerns. The second thing we heard is that it's currently underrepresented in the existing system. And the third was that while it's a community of interest, it does have an affinity with some residential neighborhoods at the base of the escarpment that would share concerns over, for example, the management of the escarpment. And to address these concerns that we heard in the first phases of consultation, we kind of came up with 3 possible solutions or ways that we could configure wards around the escarpment. The first being to put the escarpment all in one ward, and that is actually the first 4 images on the left. You can see that all of those options have the escarpment all in one quite large ward. Options that would divide the escarpment among 2 wards as it currently does. And then options that would divide the escarpment among all the wards. And these are the options that we kind of refer to as the layer cake options that were discussed in consultations. And it kind of leads to 2 choices. One where we focus all of the representation for the escarpment in one ward, but recognizing that this would result in fewer escarpment-oriented voices on council, versus dividing the escarpment among wards, which would increase the number of seats on council, but dilute the voting power of that community of interest in electing its own representatives. So on balance, we have shown that we like the escarpment in one ward option, and that's kind of shown in the number of options that we present that have the escarpment all in one ward. And the last factor we looked at is we looked above the escarpment, and then we also want to look at the orientation of boundaries below the escarpment. So there's a lot of ways that this can be done because there's a lot more density and a lot more distinct communities. But primarily what we looked at were options that would divide the lower escarpment along the waterfront using north to south boundaries. And those are the options in that center column. And then options that would divide the lower escarpment primarily along west to east boundaries. So using things like the escarpment as a natural boundary, the CN line, Main Street, Livingston, the QEW, kind of more in recognition of major transportation routes and how people travel across the community. The other point here is just in the lower escarpment, we also deal with the downtown district and where that should go. And we did hear that it was a community of interest, and in earlier iterations of the ward boundary options, we did try to keep it unified. However, you'll notice in most of the iterations, the downtown does end up getting divided, and this is for 2 reasons. One, that Main Street and Christie Street go right through the downtown, and these are both really effective boundaries because they're easily identifiable streets. The second is that you've got quite large unified residential neighborhoods on three sides of, and the escarpment on three sides of the downtown, which leads to the downtown being a natural dividing point. And so that leads us into the ward boundary options. So I'll hand it back to John.
Thanks, Olivia. So the scorecard, and I'm not sure that I am controlling the slides, Donna, so that they seem to be moving of their own accord. So I may need your help on that. But the scorecard that we applied to all of the ward boundaries is derived from the terms of reference. And the terms of reference, as I suggested, are very much conceptually linked to the principles of effective representation, which we've previously discussed. Let's see if this moves it. It is not moving it. Perhaps Donna or Madam Clerk, I could ask you to advance it to the next, because it doesn't seem to be moving. No? Sorry, members of council, just says I. There we go. Thank you. So we have presented the ward boundary options as set out in this chart. And the way you read the chart is there are 4 categories. So there are 8 ward options, 4 ward options, 6 ward options, and 3 ward options. And of course, the 8 ward options lead to a council of 9 with 1 per ward. And the 1A is a improved version of the one that we presented in the public consultation. And it is the preferred ward option. And it has a number of fairly favorable aspects to it, and we'll see it in a minute. Given the interest in the maintaining the status quo that was expressed by some, and also the fact that there's just more options when you work with the 4 wards and 2 per ward. It was quite a workout. We came up with several different ways of achieving numbers that were more or less favorable. As you can see, we find that 5B is the preferred of this category. And in fact, in our opinion, it's the one that works the best from a point of view of overall effective representation. Of the 6 ward options, which of course are 1 per ward, and that gives you a resulting council of 7. Option 2B is the preferred one, and not surprisingly, that's like an upgraded version of 2, and we think it's better than option 3. And we also came up with a couple of 3 ward options, only one of which we've presented here. So this is where you have a council of 7, 2 per ward. And option 7A is an upgrade over some of the ones that we originally considered, but we actually don't recommend it. We wanted to kind of be able to present you something that we thought was good for each of the 4, but honestly, we think that the 3 previous categories are superior to the 4th, and you'll probably be able to see why we think that in a moment when we show you them. So if we could first jump to the next slide. So these are the 8 ward, 1 per ward options. And if you go to the next slide, please. This one was our first try, if you will. And as you can see, pretty much everything we presented, like if it didn't have acceptable math, we didn't present it. Because as you know, the math of being acceptable is sort of a sine qua non. So this first version was our sort of first attempt in batting practice, if you will, to try and come up with a cluster of 8 wards. And you see here the point illustrated that Olivia was making about the wards become smaller to accommodate the appropriate ward size, because you're looking for a total ward average size in the near term of only about 3,900 or just less than 4,000. And so that's why a site like the Fifth Wheel site has such a huge impact when you get down to more like a larger number of wards. It has quite a disproportionate impact. Now, if you jump to slide, the next slide, please, you'll see this is a cleaned up, improved way of trying to express another attempt at the same thing. You see, it puts a greater reliance on using the QEW, which was recommended to us by many participants. It comes up with more effective outcomes. The math isn't great. It's not terrible, but it would be acceptable because, as you know, the math is something we're supposed to have regard to, and it is possible, though, to deviate from the target of plus or minus 25 if it's justifiable for purposes of effective representation. A legitimate concern about this is the resulting Ward 8 is very large, and the escarpment ward. You could also say, in order for it to be big enough, it does have to stray to the lower side of the escarpment to some degree. So, if there's a weakness about this, it's probably inherent in the fragmentation of Grimsby into so many wards. You'll also see in every one of the options, we maintained the integrity of Grimsby Beach because it was told to us that that was a thing of great importance. And in every case, pretty much, we would try to keep the fifth wheel site with the remainder of Grimsby on the Lake. But again, in this small execution, it became necessary to tip it over into Ward 5. But we heard a couple of very passionate voices tell us in the public consultation that we should really think about the similarity of interests of people in different forms of housing. And we just wanted to put on the record that one of the reasons we paid such a lot of attention to that in our modeling was because of the input that we had in that regard. Olivia, is there anything else we should mention about this, or can we move on to the next category?
Just to point out that some of the weirder projections are just the result of property lines that kind of go weird places. So, in Ward 2, if you look at the strange projection into the escarpment, it's actually just the back of someone's property that goes quite far south, but their driveway would be on a street below the escarpment.
And Olivia, you're just fading in and out a little bit.
Sorry, I was just going to say the weird projection that you see on Ward 2 or potentially in some other places that back onto the escarpment are only because we use property lines for the boundaries between wards and not because someone, halfway up the escarpment is actually in the Ward 2 as shown. Their house would be on the lower escarpment. Their property line just extends far up the escarpment.
Thank you. And that sound was much better. If we could jump to the next slide, please. And then the one after as well. So these are the 8 councilors, 1 mayor, 2 per ward. So you'd call this the status quo in the sense of council structure. This was our first attempt at coming up with an option along these lines. You can see that the wards straddle the QEW. So if we jump to the next one, you can see this one still straddles the QEW, but it's flipped the fifth wheel site into Ward 2. That has quite a significant effect, as you can see, on improving the performance of the numbers. And if we could just flip back to the previous slide for a second, you'll see this one in the range of, we've got an outer range of plus 23 in Ward 4. And you can see that's because it has the fifth wheel site in it. And if we go back to 4A, you can see that we managed to tone down some of those differences. And we think this one is an acceptable option mathematically. It's not our favorite of these categories, but this one would do. Now, if we jump to the next one, which is 5, this one isn't recommended. You can see again that these wards, there are some problems with this one. They straddle the QEW. You still have the fifth wheel site in the new ward 4. So that's a good thing. You've got one unified Ward 3, but there were some projections that people didn't love in this. So in the public consultation, this one did pretty well. The people said you could do better than this, and so we then tried a bunch of other changes which led to the next slide, please, which was 5B. This is actually the one we like the best. It really tries to use the QEW. It achieves single ward representation for the escarpment. It has really nice mathematical parity over the entire study period. This one has considerably the best of the mathematical outcomes. So if you were just looking for something purely on the basis of parity, this would be the winner. But based on what we heard, we heard some very passionate comments about how the Grimsby was really about east-west communities, not north-south ones. And so this one kind of unified those, taking advantage of the QEW. This is one we quite like. Olivia, any comments on this before we move on?
No, just that these are the two options 4 and 5 are really where you can see the more extensive use of Main Street as a divider, which does cut through the downtown. And that was done for clarity purposes and also just to provide cleaner lines along those boundaries.
So the next slide, please. So the origin of these so-called layer cake ideas was various folks participating in the consultation. And the idea was, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could make it so that we could minimize the effect of difference in geography and have it so that everybody had a legitimate stake in everything from the shoreline all the way to Mud Street. And, there's a kind of pleasant logic about that. But if you look at the result in the escarpment area, what you get is 4 fragmented areas that would really sort of slice and dice the escarpment into very different sets of interests. It's not clear to us that it really represents anything by that stage. And of course, the real problem is with the weight of population being focused towards the shoreline. The net result is that while you increase the number of elected representatives who are potentially interested in all areas of the ward and the escarpment, you basically dilute the voting block interest of the escarpment to such a degree that you'd really be minimizing their heft at the time of the election and potentially during the time of on an ongoing basis for service, on a constituency basis. And so we became very concerned that really the effect of this model, as well-intentioned as it was from those who were suggesting it, is really almost to simulate an at-large voting system, and that it really doesn't deliver cohesive wards in the traditional sense, but it would just make sure that people were getting elected on a less than the total population basis, but sliced and diced into very small, into 4 smaller areas, but ones that didn't really respect the fundamental east-west nature of Grimsby's growth in reality. So we tried it, but we didn't like it. You can see the math works, but we didn't favor it. The next option was an attempt to smooth out the numbers a little bit better, and we did, but we still didn't really recommend this one. The next option. So this one was recommended to us by someone who said, listen, just do as little damage as possible. And we sort of smiled at that comment because it really wasn't our intention to do any damage, but we understood what he meant. And so this was an attempt to basically try and go from option 4 and improve it. And this is where you sort of see the reality of some of what Olivia was talking about you can only squeeze the toothpaste in so many ways. So what this does is it mimics your current ward structure by having 2 escarpment wards, but it shifts everything around. And so it sort of squeezes the population, if you will, by moving it up into the escarpment in Ward 1. If you said, well, I like everything else about this, can't I, if you don't like dividing up the escarpment, can't you shrink down the escarpment? And the answer is, well, yeah, you can. and then you pretty much wind up with the Ward 4 options, which we said are actually pretty good. But option 8 is what happens if you squeeze the population, if you will, towards Ward 1 and up into the escarpment. If you squeeze it back down again, then you wind up with something that looks more like option 4. And ultimately, we think that option 5 provides the superior representation. We don't love this one because it splits the escarpment into 2, and it's difficult enough getting enough weight on the escarpment to have it be appropriately represented. And we believed that it probably gave better effective representation through option 5B. But we were asked to consider this, and so we did. And this is what it looks like. And as you can see, the math isn't quite as good. Well, it isn't as good at all as 5B, but it would be acceptable. Olivia, is there anything else we should comment on this one?
No.
Okay, thanks. So if we could go to the next slide, we're almost through. These are your 6 ward, 1 per ward. This is a little bit easier than than dividing it all the way into 8. And so our first try at this tried to create wards that basically straddled the QEW and left 1 ward intact for the escarpment. And as you can see, the numbers are what they are. They're acceptable, but they're not great. If we move to the next one, this was our second attempt. And as you can see, we take greater use of the QEW in this. We think it's more successful. The numbers are better, although they do get a little bit out of whack by 2030 because of growth in Ward 6. And you know, Ward 6 is always going to be a problem in this, or at least the territory of Ward 6, Grimsby on the Lake is always a problem the more wards you get, because it experiences a higher rate of growth. And so proportionally, that makes a bigger difference on a smaller base. So
Sorry, just to clarify, John, that you're talking about Ward 5.
Oh, sorry, thanks. Yeah, I'm talking about my eyes getting bad, I think is really the reality of that. So yes, Ward 5. And then if we can jump to the next one.
I would just point out about the last one that we're looking at very small numbers for Ward 6 in the previous option, because one of the comments we did here was, hey, take a look at, if it's with the math is within acceptable ranges and the escarpment is a community of interest, try to keep them as unified and, try to exclude as many lower escarpment neighborhoods as possible to keep it within acceptable ranges. And so there's a kind of a purpose to the low math in Ward 6 in this option. And then we did our best to balance the math out below the escarpment.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that actually is a great one for showing the fact that it is acceptable to make a deliberate choice to bend in favor of less parity of population if it's necessary to achieve outcomes of effective representation. And so that's this on display here in 2B. And if we could jump to the next one. This is the six layer cake, and as opposed to the 4 that we already discussed. And if the 4 didn't deliver great effective representation because it sliced things too thinly, we would suggest that this is worse. Now, we can also say that you can very quickly imagine what an option would look like where it was 3 wards of 2 per on a council of 6, just simply by combining 6 and 5 and 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. But again, we don't love dividing the escarpment in 3 much more than we like dividing it in 4. But we point out that without any great creativity, you can get a sub option out of this that jumps to 2 councillors per ward. And so we preferred the previous one. And then if we jump, we're almost through the tour. So this is the 6 ward, 2 per ward options. As I just mentioned, if you jump to the next slide, we had that other option that we could do where we slice them like a 3-layer cake. We also tried this one where you squeeze 1 and 3 into the middle. You can see that the numbers work pretty well. This doesn't fail on the parity. we just didn't really believe that this reflected any, like aside from reflecting Grimsby on the lake and reflecting the Grimsby Beach area, we didn't think that this really captured the escarpment properly or did much for the downtown. And again, by making 3 wards of this size, if you wanted this, you might be just as well off heading all the way towards at large. So we didn't particularly recommend this one on its ability to deliver effective representation as a whole, but on the mathematical parity side of things, it works. So if we jump to the next slide.
Just one thing on the math too. When you're looking at it's worth noting that it's a lot easier to achieve parity on the 3 ward options because you're dealing with a larger average ward size. So it takes quite a few more residents to impact to really get the variances out of whack. And that's something to be noted about the 8 ward options as well, that even though in an 8 ward option, we're looking at variances of up to 25%, that only represents about, I think, like 1,200 residents because the average ward size is so small. So 24% in a 3 ward option would be a much larger number of residents than, for example, in the 8 ward option. So it's just something to consider when we're talking about variance, but considering different numbers of wards.
So we're now very near the end of the tour. If we could just go to the summary of recommendations. As you can see, if you like the 6 ward option, 1 per, then option 2B delivers something that's very effective and would work. If you prefer moving to, or like keeping your council of 8, but going to the accountability of a single councillor per ward, then option 1A is our best advice as to how to do that. I've probably already talked enough about option 5B, so I'll merely say this is the one that we think hits the mark the best of the various 4 ward 2 per options, having regard to the various neighborhoods that it respects and outcomes that it delivers. But we are, very humbly acknowledge that this is very much a kind of thing that the eye is in the beholder. Now, I just wanted to make one other point. You might say, okay, so fine, here are your final 3 recommendations. Which do you prefer? Well, we do prefer 5B, but we prefer 5B because it's 8 councillors, a mayor, and 2 per ward that we think, based on the way the wards are drawn, delivers effective representation that's better than any of the other ones. But you might say, but wait a minute, you didn't give us an opinion on whether 7 is better than 9. Or whether 2 per ward is better than 1 per ward. And here's what we would say about that. There might be, there is a bit of academic literature that says 7 is a great size for a board. But we can't sit here and say that it's so persuasive that you got it wrong because you got 9. Like, that wouldn't, in our opinion, be an appropriate evidence-based recommendation to make. The fact is, of municipalities of similar size to yours, there are plenty that have councils of 9. As you saw in our last report, it's about 1/3. And it's about 2/3 that have councils of 7. So you could easily justify moving to 7, but we can't tell you that you've got anything that's broken or in need of a fix because you've got 9. The money is immaterial. It wouldn't be a material change. So really, we believe that that's a preference, and that the better way to decide is, how do you like the resulting wards that you get? And similarly, 1 per ward is obviously the most common model, and it provides obvious benefits of accountability because, the buck stops here, there's 1 person who's responsible. But for every person who expresses that opinion, there's another who might say, yeah, but that means you've got inside your ward somebody who's a king. And boy, it's nice to be able to go to 2 different possible sources for support. Now, of course, to some degree, I think we sometimes take, it's drawing ward boundaries is really important, but the Municipal Act doesn't say that you're supposed to act in the best interests of your ward. The Municipal Act says that a member of council's role is to act in the best and make decisions based on the best interests of the municipality. So I think it's an exaggeration to say, oh my goodness, depending on what ward structure you choose, you're going to disincent or make it more difficult for people to get service from your councillors. The Municipal Act makes it clear that all of you are jointly and severally responsible for serving everyone, and considering you're all only one vote and you're all supposed to consider the whole thing. You know that very well. I'm just saying for the record that I don't think we can look at you and say one is better and two is wrong any more than we could say that two is better and one is wrong. So we honestly believe that it's a matter of preference. And obviously Grimsby has gotten along just fine with Council of 9 and 2 per ward for quite some time. So we sort of declined to make a recommendation on it because we really try to make stuff that's evidence-based and principles-based and that comes out of the terms of reference. And other than vague academic preferences, we really can't steer you on that. We think that you, as people who operate the system every day, know what's best for Grimsby. And so it's not that we're ducking the question, it's that we almost think it would be a usurping of your decision-making role if we were to wrap up a recommendation on that as if it were an expert opinion. But we do ultimately make a recommendation, though, that would lead you to a Council of 9, 4 wards with 2 per, but it's because of the resulting wards, not because we have it in for or against councils of 7 or 1 per ward. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry that maybe took a few minutes longer than we intended, but it was a really lengthy piece of research, and we thought it important to present this to you in a way that would facilitate your decision making. So happy to take any questions and look forward to the comments of council.
Thank you very much, John and Olivia, for your presentation. Yes, it was lengthy, but it was certainly fulsome, and it was certainly long overdue. So that may have contributed to some of the length. Councillor Vane.
Thank you very much, both of you, for your presentation. It was very much appreciated and very, obviously you've spent a great deal of time. I have to say, on a personal note, I'm a little disappointed. I remember reading an article before I got involved in local politics, and it was a comment made by a councillor in Hamilton, and he said, I'm not sure how many councillors Hamilton has, I don't know, 10, 12, whatever they've got. But he said, I'm the only representation on the mountain, and when it comes time to put stuff in, I always get last kick at the cat because everybody wants to make sure the urban areas get the money first. And I was really hoping that you would promote ideally a 6-ward, you did have it in there, but you didn't recommend it, a 6-ward option with 1 councillor per ward, because I think councillors would be more dedicated if they're more responsible, and it would cause less conflicts within wards. But also the idea that the mountain is going to be represented by 1 or 2 councillors, I still think that's problematic. Just my opinion. I know that's not an option on there, the one I want, but I will listen to everybody else and we'll hopefully make a joint decision on what's best. But the other option, or the other thing too, that I was kind of hoping that would come out of this study, and the reason I brought it forward, was to reduce the size of council. I find that with 9 people, and you can see this in any council, the bigger the council gets, the more disagreements is, the more the division. Toronto's a perfect example. When it used to be 40 or 50, like it was just impossible. Meetings would go on forever, and we're finding that too. I just think with more focused and less members of council, we might be able to move a little better. And as I say, I really think that I would like to see every council cover parts of the town, because as you said yourself, we are expected to, in theory, represent the whole town, but in general practice, when it comes to something like, doing something for one person's ward versus somebody else's ward, oftentimes the council will pick their own ward first. So that's why I'm just a little disappointed with that. But other than that, you did fantastic work, and I guess we'll work with what you presented. We'll look at your recommendations and we'll consider. I mean, I know different councillors have brought up different ideas of what they would like to see. So I will look forward to hearing from everybody else. Thank you.
Councillor Frick.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I totally agree with Councillor Vane on that note, that I do, maybe it's just me, but I know that you had 20 to 24 participants in this particular study and in this group. And I do, by the way, I appreciate all you've done. It's a lot of work, and I appreciate all the people who've come out and participated in this. I attended all of them, and certainly what you presented is not what I expected, to be honest with you. I thought there would be more of a preference towards the 6th ward. But anyways, I'm just concerned that if we do have one ward for the escarpment, like Councillor Vane mentioned, is that that person gets lost in the crowd of the other 4 or 5. And I don't think I mean, that's maybe just me talking, maybe I'm totally wrong, I'm off base here, but I think that the escarpment does not get the full attention. If we had each of the, because it's an anomaly compared to the other wards. It's very different. I don't think people in that part of Grimsby feel like they're represented 100%. And so I think that if we have 1 or 2 councillors representing that ward, they will probably be ruled down a number of times when it comes to council voting on things which the escarpment may not want, so they don't get proper representation. So I just have a concern about that. I have my own preferences here, but I won't state them here. But I'll reserve my some time to talk again later. But I would like to have seen that being one of the preferred ward boundaries, as see the north-south layer cake kind of situation. Anyway, thank you, and I'll come back again later. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bothwell.
Mayor Jordan, and I appreciated the presenter's very clear and concise presentation. And I attended all of the PICs as well and listened to the community members voice their preferences at those. To me, that it was just a very small representation that contributed, and it's unfortunate with COVID that we really, the 24 participants, there were some that were consistently across the 4 meetings, right? I would ask the presenter how many contributed comments to the platform, the engagement platform, and the survey, and how many were rural residents? Were they separated between mountain and below escarpment? So we would have an idea as to how the representation was on the commenting. I just wondered, and I'm hesitant tonight to make any decision, just because I just don't know if we've actually had enough public participation on this. So if they can answer those questions, that would be helpful.
I can jump on that one. For the survey in the second round, the 24 is how many people participated in the online survey. And so a lot of the comments that are in the report are those directly from the survey, although we did include some kind of annotated versions from the notes that we took of the meetings as well. That is why we did not use the quantitative data that we collected from the survey to inform kind of decisions on council size, and why we didn't present them in the body of the text, because we didn't feel like it was a representative of the, well, it's not, 24 people is not representative of the entire population, but we thought the comments were useful in designing and editing the boundary options that we presented. In terms of division along escarpment versus lower escarpment, we didn't have that. We did, I think, present for the population, or for this online survey, in the appendix, we do have we asked people what ward they were from. And so obviously, because 2 and 4 are both in the escarpment, it's not a perfect divider, but the majority of the respondents were from Ward 4.
Thanks, Olivia. And I recognize the names because they're down here in my area. So I would say they're not escarpment people. I'm by the lake. So I hear what you're saying, and I heard this through the presentation as well, that 24 is not a good representation from the community out of 30-some thousand people to make this decision. And I was hearing that the report is based on your methodology and best opinions more than anything. So I'm just again leaning towards looking to the clerk and deferring this to try to see how we can actually get a broader representation. I just don't feel that I agree with the expert opinions presented. I just think we're not hearing from the people, and that's what I'm missing. Thank you.
Councillor Cadwell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jordan. And I'd like to thank John and Olivia for all the hard work you put in this, and I attended all of them too. And it's great to, the public numbers weren't large by any means, but just the public that was involved. I'd like to thank them too, because a lot of them were involved with, excuse me, through the whole process. So just looking at your report, which covers a lot of different variations here, I think the 5B does have a lot of merit to it as the one you're recommending. I know it pretty much gives the Ward 3, which would be mainly the escarpment, 2 councillors that would be just focusing mainly to the escarpment, because the looks like the border is Main Street east and west, which is pretty much, somewhat the base of the escarpment in most areas anyways. I know more to the west, you got a lot of Councillor Sharp's subdivision there too. But I'm just wondering if there's a possibility if this could be put on any of the town's social media for more comments from the public too. If that's an option, we can move with that. And let's see, what else was there? Oh, if we go to less councillors, as the leaders of this project, John and Olivia, do you foresee any savings going, say, to 7 councillors, 8 counting the mayor? So really eliminating 1 councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. In our last report, we commented on the savings, and our view was that they were negligible. And it's, of course, we sort of proposed last time, and I think we were, it was really approved, like not formally, but the feedback that we got was stay on an odd number for the resulting number. So yes, you could either go from a council of 9 and 8 councillors, or you could go down to 6 plus the mayor for 7. So it would be 2. It was about $50,000 that you might save. I think we calculated, because it was offset to some degree by some of the increased electoral costs, but it wasn't enough money that we thought it was determinative of the governance future of a place like Grimsby. So we thought it was better focusing on the effectiveness of the representation rather than dollars.
Great, thanks for that response, John. What I do like about the 5B, it has some very distinct arteries as the borders to the wards. Because I know in the past, when you're out campaigning and people, they'll go, "Oh, I'm in Ward 2. Where's Ward 2 go?" Like from a boundary standpoint. But I like how you've used the QE. You used Main Street east and west. So I'm impressed with 5B, and I look forward to staff will also, I'm sure, have some input in helping us make a decision here too. I would hope. Anyways, thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. To the presenter and council, I like option 8, and one of the things I like about it is that it's quite similar to our current layout, and so I didn't like when we split into the layer cake, all those lines going up and down, but I do like having representation of 2 wards on the mountain, and I think that it's a valuable thing. I think that there's 4 councillors up there who are listening to their constituents that are on the mountain. There are residents on the mountain, and with it split, so whether you have an issue on one half of the mountain or the other half of the mountain, all the residents are watching how the councillors vote, and they're watching how that vote would affect them, even though it's not in their ward. They are watching how the councillor who votes on the other side of the mountain is favorable to other people on the mountain's opinion. So I like that. I also like that, and it's so similar to the way that our current ward boundary is that about half of downtown is in Ward 2, and about half of downtown is in Ward 1. So so there's 4 councillors who have a vested interest in the general success or opinion of downtown. And rather than having more, just one. So I think that is the same value that is, it's giving you 4 councillors that represent you, even though you can only vote for 2 of them. 4 of them which are interested in the same things you're interested in, like, for example, Main Street, downtown. And so I think that that's valuable. I can see that it's a little bit off on the numbers in the beginning, but it looks like it levels out as we go into the future. And so, like, we would like to see a plan that is level into the future. So I'm happy. There are things that I like about that. I don't like the option to remove to only 6 councillors. I think that we're better represented by the 4 ward 2 councillor system. And so I'm not really interested in the 2B option. Yeah, I'd just like to hear from some other councillors. I also have a question to John Matheson or Olivia. Are we voting on this tonight, or will this come back as another modified report?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, thanks for your comments, Councillor Sharp. I think it's entirely up to council whether you vote on this tonight or whether you request other iterations. The clerk can comment on what your preferred process should be, but before you can finalize something, you have to give public notice of it and have a opportunity for public comment on it. So I'm not sure whether it's appropriate to say that you'd be just receiving this tonight, or whether you'd express a preference on it. I think that's very much up to you all. And I think you could also, defer your consideration of it to after a public meeting on it. So you have a number of options to either reflect further, potentially refine, or potentially to get some more public comment on it. So, and I just wanted to make one other comment, because a couple have mentioned the desirability of splitting the escarpment, and where that's kind of dealt with in the main report, and we didn't give it much attention in our presentation tonight. But if I could just direct you to page 11, and we discuss 3 different types of heft for an area that it can have. And this kind of gets to the point that one of the councillors made right at the start, the comment about the comment from Hamilton about how there's not enough of us, and so we don't have the heft. And in our report, we comment on there's the relevance that you have at the time of the election, because you're a meaningful enough number of people to make your vote felt. And that's one kind of heft. The second kind of heft is the attention that you can command after a councillor has been elected, because, well, you better not ignore these people, because next time they'll get you because they've got heft come election. And then the third is overall heft at the council table. And what a couple of councillors, and you were just mentioning Councillor Sharp, was this idea of we only have 2 councillors at the table if it's one unified ward, and we could potentially have 4. And I got to concede that you're absolutely right. The trade-off here is, in order to concentrate your heft at the time of the election so that your vote really matters, you need to go to 2 ward, or sorry, to one ward for the whole thing. Because as you can imagine, in the option 8, to take the example that you were referring to, and it's ultimately why we prefer 5B over 8, but it's not that we're down on 8. We just prefer 5B. And it's because the escarpment gets split, and it's because the escarpment part of Ward 1 we think doesn't have much heft at the election time because the weight of the population is down by the lake. And so it's a principle in this sort of study that you try to combine people for the elections so that their vote can be heard, because it's an electoral boundary review, and you're trying to aggregate their vote and their significance at the time of the election. And then you trust to the Municipal Act that everybody will vote in the best interests of the municipality and not just play for their wards. And that's kind of an intellectual contradiction inside this whole process, because why do we fuss so much about wards if we assume everybody's going to act in the best interest of the municipality anyway? And of course, it's because it does matter. And I just want to acknowledge, it's not that we didn't consider the benefits of 2 wards versus 1. It was that we tried to do our best for the escarpment representation by giving it votes that mattered at the election time that would be focused in 1 ward. Because after all, we heard that people weren't satisfied with the level of representation for the escarpment now. And your current situation is that it's split between 2 wards that are dominated by interests further south. So we were trying to basically remediate that problem. But I just wanted to acknowledge that everybody who's made the comment about there being only 2 councillors instead of potentially 4, you're absolutely right. That's the trade-off. And so you just got to kind of pick which you prefer. But it wasn't an attempt to lower the representation of the escarpment. It was an attempt to focus it and put it where it really matters. So, but the reason why you guys get to decide is because you know best, right? So, but that's kind of our recommendation, but we totally acknowledge that it's a judgment call.
Okay, thank you, John. So I tend to I know that there's trade-offs, but I tend to like the 4 councillors at the table trade-off better. And I like having the split in the escarpment, and I like having the split in downtown. And I like there to be more people to listen to the problems of the community that are hopefully voting in the best interest of the municipality and making the smartest choice. And so you have 4 people at the table who care about that neighborhood. And then I understand what you're saying, that at voting time, you want more weight directed to people who will represent the people who vote for them. But if it's a trade-off, my choice is 4 people at the table. And I respect your opinion. And in my opinion, I would prefer option 8. I think it's simple, and I think it provides a good representation. And so my question was not necessarily directed to you, John, but if we're going to, what are our options for this? We can receive it, and or we can, I'm considering to defer it, but I don't know until when, and I don't want to defer it right now to stifle the discussion on it. But if the mayor would let me, I would like to defer this after we allow the council to speak. But I wonder, when would we defer it till, and what would be the process after we defer it?
Well, it's up to council whether you defer it, whether you receive it to be taken up later, but we do have some specific time frame because we have to go through appeals to LPAT. If there's any potential, there's a time frame for that. And what's the other time frame, Sarah? It just has to be, yes. So the bylaw has to be passed by December 31st of this year.
Okay, so we have some time. We have 6-7 months. And but I see that some of my colleagues have their hand up, and I don't want to make a motion to defer, but if I put my hand up, well, sorry, because maybe we should just receive this.
Yes, it makes much more sense to receive at this time. And then quite honestly, I'm not trying to get into debate here. I'm just offering a recommendation that we should receive it now and allow for the public. This is the first time the public's actually seen the recommendations. So we need public input through this. in order for council to make a fulsome decision with the public backing. So what we need to do is definitely receive it now, and the clerk will give us the timing of how many days for the appeal process, et cetera, et cetera. So we will revisit it in a timely fashion to allow us plenty of time to get it done by December 31st. Councillor Vardy?
Thanks.
Oh, sorry, were
Jordan,
you
that seems
done?
like a smart up.
Okay.
I'm just about done. I'm just gonna
All
wrap it up. I think that's a smart recommendation. I think I would support receiving it, taking the time to talk to residents in Grimsby, and then coming back and deciding. Thank you.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for, some very extensive work that you've done here. And in looking at it, I can debate the, I can speak favorably to many options. So it's not just a cut and dried sort of one floats to the top and that's the obvious one. So that's probably a very good thing. But it does tell me that I think we need a little more time to digest some of this. One thing I want to ask is when you're doing your numbers, I know that Councillor Frake has been looking at traffic and looking at all the development along Main Street East. And I think he told me one time there were 15 proposed developments along Main Street East. So I'm wondering if those numbers have been factored in to your numbers in making these calculations. Excuse me, that's the first question.
I can answer that one, John. Basically, so based on a cutoff date of around early February, the population projections were put together by Grimsby's planning staff and GIS staff using current applications, as well as their own opinions or projections on vacant lands and things like that for the next 10 years. So there was a certain amount of, and there's a complete list in the appendix of the report in terms of specific developments that were or were not included in the projections.
Okay, good.
And those were determined based on a number of factors, including whether or not it's, whether or not the proposed numbers are those that are expected to actually end up in the final approvals, whether or not the population is expected to actually be on site by 2030. Like in some cases, if you have a relatively new approval or a new application that's quite large, regardless of if it gets approved or not, it wouldn't actually impact population before 2030. And that was the scope of this report. So,
Okay.
So there's a complete list in the back of the report. But as you can see in that population chart we showed, we do include a number of the developments that are specifically along Main Street and along Livingston on the other side of the downtown.
All right. And I guess I would just like to add that I really do feel we need to do a lot more public consultation on this before we make any kind of decision. And, I know we put things on our website, but not everyone looks at our website. So I think we need to probably take some ads out in the newspaper to drive people to our website and whatever kind of, survey that we can develop so that we can get a lot more public input and also get a sense of, are these mountain people or the urban people, because their opinions might, be quite divergent. So, and I think it's important to know a little bit where people are coming from, because maybe we're making assumptions about the mountain and maybe people on the mountain are not feeling that way. So I don't know, but we don't know until we ask the question. So those are my comments basically, is we need to do a lot more public consultation on the options. And I think there are several good options. So thank you very much for your work.
Councillor Dunstall.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'd like to add my comments. I like 5B, but I also like 5. What I was looking at too is the variance over the next 8 to 10 years. And some of these proposals have a greater variance, and we sure don't want to strap future council with the project of doing this in 2 terms or 3 terms. If we could stretch it out longer, it would just make life a lot easier for them. So, and I see 8 too looks favorable when it comes to variances. There are some that really, they're plus 24% or minus 15%. There's quite a variance in some of them. So I would be preferred to look at those that are smaller in variance. And I think 5 and 5B are good, and so is 8. So that's a start. I'm glad I heard about the time frame. I thought we had less time. I'm happy to hear that we have till December. I think we really need to put this out to the public, like other councillors have suggested, so that they could have some wholesome input, especially the mountain. It just seems like that seems to be the area. It's the largest geographically, but sparsely populated compared to some of the other wards. So, and they, I think, genuinely feel less representative. So do they want 4 councillors split up, or do they want 2 councillors who have their undivided attention? So going public to the public with this is a great idea. A great presentation too, and thanks. It was very well done, very thorough, and I like the recommendations you made. It helps us along. So thank you very much.
Sarah's going to give the actual timeframes, a little bit of update. Harry, did you want to say something, CAO?
I was just going to talk about timeframes. Let Sarah do that, and then I have one input other than that. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So, I mean, John can clarify if I'm wrong, but so council would, if council wants to enact any of the changes by the 2022 election, council will need to approve a new ward boundary structure and enact a bylaw. And once that there's a council's approval for that bylaw, there is a 45-day statutory period in which notices of appeal for the LPAT could be filed. And depending on that appeal, there could be changes enacted, and all those changes have to be done actually by January 1st of 2022. That would be the exact time frame. So with the 45-day statutory period, you usually want to give a little more time just in case, and there's time required for consultants to come back and make any of those changes. So that would be really the basic timeframes to keep in mind.
Thank you, Sarah. CAO?
Did John first want to add something on the timelines, John, before I comment?
Yeah, just Mr. Mayor, that I totally agree with your clerk. But the practical implication of it is that it's not just the 45 days for the filing of appeal. You then have to kind of give the LPAT enough time to do its thing and conduct an appeal. And so you really wouldn't, you'd want to be finished your consideration of things by give or take the end of June. That would allow there to be 45 days for an appeal, and there would be time, if somebody filed one, for the appeal to run its course. The problem, if you don't allow enough time for the appeal to run its course, is everything has to be fully completed. The appeal has to be settled and solved in time for to hit the December 31st deadline, and so that the new thing is in place for January the 1st. And in effect, you can run out of clock if you can't get the appeal settled. So I wouldn't want you to think that you have 6 months, because you've got to leave that time budget for the appeal.
Thank you, John.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sorry, I might have been muted when I mentioned you.
So now that you heard the timeline sort of end of June, I was wondering if John and Mayor, if you can at least facilitate before we go public again to narrow down the field so that the public has a chance not to look at the wider scope of things that went out to them before, but a narrower, what can we live with going out to the public? If we can decide that today, that would really help.
Thank you, CAO. Councillor Frick.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. Just a comment on top of Harry's. If we have to debate and come up with the number of options before the end of June by making that decision tonight, I think we might be here till the wee hours of the morning before we come up with, unless we just go along with what the consultants are suggesting. So, because this is really one of the most important things we're going to do as a council, and that's decide how our electorate are going to vote for us in the next election and where they will be located and where we will be located. There's a whole lot of things in there. So hearing the end of June from John really is concerning, because we're nearly there now. So I think we're about 6 weeks before the end of June. And for us to have a really intense engagement from the community, to get communiques out there, to put these things on websites and social media and get input from the community is not going to happen that quickly. So John asked you the question, is the end of June like a wish date, or you're just being really, really safe? Or I mean, can we push that out a little further? I mean, you've probably done all the work, you're the expert. But if it's the end of June, that concerns me a little bit.
It's a great question, Councillor. No, it's not that I'm being really safe. It's that if you do get an appeal, then you have to give it time. Now, of course, you may not get an appeal, so you might say, boy, I wish we hadn't bothered hurrying because we didn't need that time after all. But you do have to respect the LPAT to be able to give them enough time, and if there is an appeal, to have an appropriate period of time. But perhaps, though, more optimistically, I liked what the CAO said about trying to narrow the options down, because it was our goal. We could be accused of over-presenting options to you, but if we hadn't, I think you'd look at us and say, how did you go from all the possible permutations just down to the 3 that you presented? And as we've heard tonight, like Councillor Sharp actually likes 8, and 8 is perfectly good. We don't prefer it, but it's not a bad option. And as a couple of councillors have mentioned, there's a couple here that could work. So what we could absolutely do is if we could settle it down to the 3 recommended options plus any other one that members of council might want to keep alive for tonight, we could come back in another 2 weeks at a public meeting and have a further round of conversation about it, and could get it up out through the various channels. So I think there's a lot that can be done in sort of 2-week bumps, provided that your clerk can find time on your agenda to squeeze things back in before you.
Yeah, thank you, John. I just think that trying to resolve that tonight is going to be a bridge too far. And I think maybe if we're going to do this in the time frame that you're suggesting that maybe we should have a special meeting just dedicated to this, because there's a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion here, and I think most of us have different versions of how we see this panning out. So I'm going to suggest that we don't make that decision tonight, but sometime over the next week, maybe we can have a special meeting and just deal with this item, because it's too important to just rush through it. Every councillor here has a different view, and I think we could probably get it down to maybe 2 or 3, because some of them are similar. I'm just going to suggest that to the rest of council, that we maybe just have a special meeting and deal with it specifically, because I just feel uncomfortable trying to get this thing through tonight with all we have going on tonight. So just my suggestion to the rest of council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bain.
First of all, I was going to suggest the same thing Councillor Frake just said. I think what we need to do is have a special meeting as a council soon to discuss what we consider are the options. And then, my biggest concern is getting out to the people, and people, somebody suggested having more meetings. Well, I don't think in this environment, people are going to come out to meetings, and a lot of people don't have access to computers. A lot of people didn't know about it. We did advertise in the newspapers. We advertised online. I'm almost thinking if we want to do this properly, is we need to come up as a council with some questions and go out to people and say, this is what we have decided what works for you. And we should be mailing that door to door. There's very low readership of the papers. Not everybody has access to the computers, all kinds of things. I think the way to do it is good old fashioned mail. Get a survey out to people, say you've got 10 days to send it back, and that gives us more than enough time to deal with it. But I think we need to talk first and decide what we want to offer as the options to people, what we think will best serve the public, and let them decide. But I think that's the best way to do it is get a survey ready. We create one, we mail it out door to door, and that's it. Because at least that way, everybody's going to get it. A lot of times people just take newspapers and throw them in the garbage. Other times they don't look on the computers and stuff. So a lot of people don't have computers or aren't computer friendly, that type of thing. So that's just my suggestion. I agree with the meeting part, but I also think we need to mail it out to people, and so that every resident gets the option to make an opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. One thing that we certainly could do is the clerk could send a small survey to council, so we come back with a reduction of options, so we can at least narrow them down to get at some sort of starting point for the public, and then get something out to the public. So a council survey where council picks their top 3 options, something like that would be able to be turned around in a couple of days, and then we move from there with public consultation. That's just a thought, and the clerk was thinking along those lines as well. Councillor Sharp, I think you're up next.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor Jordan. Those are good ideas, and I think what's important is narrowing it down, and I think we can receive this and narrow it down tonight. I don't think we can decide on it tonight. And I would like to see, it's my opinion that I like 4 wards, 8 councillors. And I think that's the best. And I feel like that my colleagues would support that too. So I'd like to remove the options that have 6 wards and 6 councillors and 8 wards. And I'd like to get it down to just the options with 4 wards and 8 councillors. And then, so that puts us at, in the report, it says 4B is acceptable, 5B is preferred, and 8 is acceptable. And those are all 4 ward, 2 councillor, 1 mayor options. And those are all what the consultant has determined are acceptable, and 1 is preferred. And I'd like to narrow it down to those 3. I'd like to receive this and narrow our choices to 4 wards, 2 councillors, and 1 mayor. And with the 3 that the consultant, there's only 3 that the consultant has deemed are acceptable. That's 4B is acceptable, 5B is preferable, and in the consultant's opinion, and 5 and 8 is acceptable in the consultant's opinion. So I would like to make a motion that we receive this and that we reduce the options to 4B, 5B, and 8, all of which are 4 ward, 2 councillor, 1 mayor options. Do I have someone who will second that? Can I make a motion right now to that effect? Receive it, reduce it, and circulate it. Yeah, that would be better. To receive it, to reduce it, and to circulate it or put it in the newspaper. Website, newspaper, circulate can be interpreted. And so can I make that motion now?
You're up. Your option is to make the motion.
Yeah,
the clerk,
I would like.
was thinking of doing a survey, but you're well within your rights to make the motion, so.
So I would like to, and not to take away from the clerk's survey or those ideas, but I would like to make a motion that we receive this and that we narrow the choices. We receive it and we circulate it to the public, and that we narrow the choices down to 4 Ward 2 councillors, which are 4B, 5B, and 8. And circulate, I mean, I'm open to interpretation of that. Newspaper, website, word of mouth. I mean, I'll share it on my social media, and I'm sure so will everybody. But if that's acceptable, would someone second that motion?
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Sharp's motion? Councillor Cadwell? I'll read it and then we'll have discussion on this. Moved by Councillor Sharp, second by Councillor Cadwell. Resolved that the council structure and ward boundary review dated May 17th, 2021 be received, and that the options be narrowed to options 4B, 5B, and 8 to be circulated for public input. Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you. I wasn't sure I was up next. That's great. Thank you, Your Worship. I tend to lean towards Councillor Frake's idea of having a special meeting and having further discussion. And instead of solidifying it tonight, I'd rather us have a bit more debate on it. So I'd prefer to see it received and then brought back after a special meeting. And I think we should leave it open for the public to have their input on. I think we should give a preferred number, like the 3 that Councillor Sharp is suggesting, but allow the public to say, hey, we don't like any of those. This is what we like. And so I think we need to be open to that too. I don't want to suggest to the public that these are the only 3 options that we're going to give you. So I think we need to still have some more discussion. So I'm happy to go to a special meeting if that be the case. So that's my comments at this point.
Councillor Vardy?
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I believe that a special meeting is in order, and I wouldn't want to presuppose how the public feels about 6 councillors versus 8 plus a mayor. So I think we need further discussion. This is a really transformational issue that we're dealing with here, and it's very important that we get public input. So I think we should use every means possible to drive the public to get their opinion. So, you know, whether it's online surveys, things in the newspaper, everyone putting stuff on our individual social media, but so that we can kind of drive as much attention to this issue for the public before we settle on any kind of options, because I'm just not comfortable with sort of us deciding something that's so important without getting the public's input. Thanks.
Councillor Bothwell.
Thanks, Mayor Jordan. I agree with Councillor Vardy and with Councillor Dunstall. I think we do need to have more, we need a special meeting just to iron out what we're going to put forward to the public. The options that Councillor Sharp has put forward, he mentions number 8 is recommended, but it's showing in the report from the consultant as not recommended. And there's still potential that, for instance, 6, when I was in on the meetings, there were a number of people who were really in love with the later cake look, the wards that actually extended all the way up the escarpment, each of them. So I wouldn't want to rule out that, like, for instance, option 6A is something that people would want to consider. But so because that also came up as a preference, but I think that special meeting is important for us to narrow down. And like Councillor Vardy said, give the public the options to look at each of the configurations and the preferred configurations, and maybe do those 3 plus 1 or 2 additional ones as choices. But I don't think tonight we can do that. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sharp, you're muted. Councillor Sharp, you're still muted.
Oh, sorry. Back to the beginning. I don't completely agree that we haven't consulted the public, but I am amenable to having a special meeting and consulting with them some more. We can narrow it down there. So, I mean, I liked my proposal, but I'm willing to amend it just to say that we would receive it, and if someone can give me some input on how to amend it, I would be willing to amend it to receive it and bring it back to a special council meeting this week. Or if I'm lost for words on how to complete that, if anybody has some input, that'd be great.
So, Councillor Sharp, you want to receive it and then bring it back to a special council meeting, essentially, to discuss further options.
Bring it to a special council meeting to narrow the options just to narrow the options, right? And then at that special council meeting, we would make another resolution to circulate it, and we don't need to do that all in one shot. We can just receive it and bring it to a special council meeting. I don't know if that's acceptable wording, but I'm okay with that, or a small change. Go ahead.
I was just thinking we could certainly save time by having a survey with council of their options, and that would narrow it down. And then we can get the public involved sooner rather than later. That's just my thought.
So maybe if I were to change it to say we will receive it, circulate a survey to council, and then return to a public meeting to narrow the options. I don't know if we have to do that all by way of resolution, but I agree that sure, we could circulate a survey so that when we come to the special council meeting, we already have given some input. And any of my colleagues have any opinion? I mean, we're all going to have to vote on this, so.
Councillor Cadwell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jordan. Yeah, I think it, again, I supported the motion just to get it on the table, and I agree with a lot of the points to it. I think we need to look at having a special council meeting, but if we can, in the interim of that, before that, if the survey can be put out to councillors before say we have a special council meeting early next week or something like that, after the long weekend, and gives us a starting
Okay.
point. I don't want to go through what we're doing tonight, which is good. Don't get me wrong. We're trying to get ourselves in the right position. But if we can get, with a council survey before our special council meeting. Also, I like Councillor Vane's idea. Again, with all due respect to the public, in the past, we've tried to do many surveys and that. Sometimes the numbers aren't what we're hoping for. So, but I like his idea of maybe a census style of a report put out to the public, mailing and maybe give them a few days. I know timelines are important here, and I understand that, but I just think that this is such an important topic that look at the census that we just completed. I think something along that type of value could really help us out a lot too. Again, getting it and doing it respective good timelines. So yeah, thank you.
Councillor Frake.
I don't think Councillor Ritchie spoke yet, did he? I spoke once.
Oh, sorry. I didn't see your hand, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Ritchie, you're up.
No worries. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Frake. I'm just going to make a suggestion. Thank you, John. Thank you, Olivia, for the report. My suggestion is that if we're going to go to a special council meeting, which I agree, I think the clerk maybe put a survey out to all the councillors. And I think that we could decide right now, maybe not through me, but through council, whether we come up with the top 5, 6. There's 13 options here. Some of them are not preferred. But I think if we could go into that special council meeting with, if we've given a recommendation of 5 or 6, then it might be able to narrow down the conversation, because I have to agree that doesn't matter what meeting we go to next, this meeting will be a very long meeting. So if we have some indication, even if it's the survey, and rank them all if you want, all 13, every councillor rank them, whatever they want to do, so then at least we know that here's the data between the councillors, that these are the most preferred 6 options or whatever it is, then maybe we can proceed from there. And it does help to narrow it down.
Yeah, if I could just jump in, I'd be happier with top 3. Once we get to 6 times 9, that's 54 different potential options. So, Councillor Frake?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that, Mayor Jordan. Yeah, maybe we can do this outside of this meeting. Maybe the clerk can come to us on email and we just submit our 3 options that prepares us for the next meeting. But yeah, we can't do this tonight. I keep saying that, and there's lots of ways of getting this out to the public. There are petitions, as Councillor Cadwell mentioned a minute ago. We know that petitions work really well. We can use various types of social media to do that. But I just think we just need to move on from this. I'd like to suggest that Councillor Sharp amend his motion to go into the special meeting. Let's ask the clerk to canvass the council and get their top 3 potentials, and let's go from there, because this, as I said, this is really important, and this is really important that we get public input. And obviously, with this deadline hanging over us now, we need to do this pretty quickly. So let's move forward with a special meeting and get this done. And time is dragging on as it is. Thank you.
Yeah, we do have amended resolution that essentially says that. So, Councillor Ritchie, you wanted to speak?
A question on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to clarify something, that when I sit there and state that if the clerk's going to do some kind of survey, and each council is going to give their 5 or 6 opinions, we're not going to be looking at 54 different situations. She's going to accumulate the data, and she'll come back with the top 5 or 6 recommendations based on the number of people who voted for those options. And when I listen to the conversation, when I hear Councillor Bothwell and Councillor Dunstall, Councillor, everyone here, that we want to limit our options to the public. And I think that we can bring forward 5 or 6 options, or even we can break those 5 or 6 down to 3 at that meeting. And that was my intent, is that if everyone goes and the data is accumulated, Then the clerk comes back and says, these are the 6 that were the most voted for from this council. And then we proceed from the meeting. That was my thought process. So, but I'm happy with whatever.
All right, thanks for the clarification, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Sharp?
Thanks, Mayor Jordan. So I'd be happy to amend the motion to say we would receive, that we would survey council to narrow the options. We would call a special council meeting, or we would return to a special council meeting to confirm the options. And then we would circulate those options to the residents and public. I don't know if we need to do that now or at a special meeting. But to Councillor Ritchie's point, so we have 13 choices here. So if the clerk is going to survey us, can we narrow these choices down before? So like if we did 1A, 2B, 4B, 5B, and 8, and then we could survey that leaves in an 8-word option, a 4-word option, a 6-word option. It gives options of 7. There's no option of 1 councillor per ward in that one, but
Well, there's one.
so then, but then it's much more concise, and the council can bring that down to like maybe a list of 3, and then at the meeting we can circulate those 3. Does anyone have any disagreement with narrowing it to 5 now or 6?
I'll just read the resolution and
Yeah.
then moved by Councillor Sharp, second by Councillor Cadwell. Resolved that the council structure and ward boundary review dated May 17th be received, and that the clerk circulate a council survey to narrow the option and to bring the matter back to a special council meeting May 25th, 2021. And I say May 25th, 2021, because we already have a planning meeting that night, so we'll do it after that.
Can I second that motion and call the question?
Yeah,
I
sure,
think
that's okay.
I think
we already have
Councillor
a
Sharp
seconder.
and Councillor Cadwell. So we already have a mover and a seconder.
I'll call the question then.
All right, question has been called. All in favor? Does anyone want a recorded vote? Looks like we have enough to pass. That's carried.
That was unanimous.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, bye, John, and bye, Olivia. Thank you very much for your presentation again. And yes, just a job well done. And we do certainly like what you've done. And we had seen a lot of you over the last few months. So thank you very much again. Have a good evening.
It was our pleasure. Thank you.
Now we're moving to report 8.1B. Consent item 7.1A is FIN 2112 tax write-offs. Oh, Melanie's going to speak on that. Melanie, welcome.
Good evening, Council. So I think Councillor Bothwell had a question on that report that I can try to address.
Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. Yeah, just 2 questions. The first one is 229 Central Avenue. Is that the home in the Phelps Legacy development, or which property is that, and what has it changed? What class has it changed from and to?
So I can't speak to exactly which home and property is because I don't know that off the top of my head, but I do know that this situation is that it was a commercial property and it's been reclassed to a residential property, and it's also been severed. So that's what's going on with that particular location. But I don't know the details about which development. I would have to take that back.
Okay, because it's giving, I guess, a commercial tax break. Is that what it's giving, and reclass it, or it's changing it from CT to what tax class?
CT to RT. So it's moving from a commercial tax class to a residential tax class.
Okay, but you don't know if it's part of that subdivision.
I only know the address. I'm not certain which subdivision that would be, and I would have to take that back to staff.
Okay, yeah, if you could, that would be interesting to know which one it was. And then the second question is, I know there was some discussion on the DIA and that tax rebate for the MPAC reassessment of the Canadian Tire and the Sobeys Plaza. Is there any impact here with respect to tax write-offs with that or anything? No.
So through the mayor, it's a good question. So no, it's not related at all. So what this report is doing is just dealing with the specific applications we received under the Section 357 of the Municipal Act. The previous situation that we looked at with the DIA was minutes of settlement that was brought through MPAC. So the property owners went to MPAC and they had the assessment of their land we looked at through that process, and we received the results of that. So this is two separate processes.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That's it.
Great, thank you. Seeing no further questions. Thank you, Melanie, for your answers. And just need a mover and seconder. Councillor Dunstall, Councillor Vardy. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, second by Councillor Vardy. Resolved that report FIN 2112 tax write-offs dated May 17th, 2021 be received, and that the total tax write-offs of $12,179.85 as outlined in Appendix A be approved. All in favor? That's carried. Up next, we have consent item 7.1B, 2102, frequently requested bylaw review schedule. Yeah. All right, the clerk's going to comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, were there any questions specific to this report?
Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you again, Mayor. Thank you, Clerk, for putting this forward and bringing it to our attention. I appreciate that these items are going to now be reviewed on a cyclical manner, and that there's also going to be a review of other ones that may not have been captured in this report. And that's great. The one that I just wanted to comment on the interval for was the procedural bylaw. And the reason I'm raising that is because of, what occurred tonight with the agenda items and the deletion of agenda items. And I'm thinking that I don't think we can wait until 2022 to resolve maybe some of those little tweaky things that need to be cleaned up in language. So I would ask if it's possible to move up the procedural bylaw to maybe to look at that in Q1 of 2022 or earlier if possible. Actually in Q4 if we could, just because of this year. Is that amenable to you to maybe look at making that change? That's the only one that I think, and you did say, which was good, that we can review them at any time should there be an immediate need or legislative changes. So I think that permits these to be reviewed outside of that timeline that you put in there. Is that correct?
Yeah, so generally we look at a review, like a full scope review every 4 years, but any tweaky kind of amendments can be done throughout the whole term. And but we're good with changing it to Q1 of 2022 to look at it further.
Actually, can I say Q4 of 2021?
Sure.
Please, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Frank.
Thank you to you, Mayor Jordan. To Sarah, just of the list that's there, the one that stands out for me is the frequently requested bylaw for the incorporation of Niagara Power. It kind of looked weird in there. I don't know what's all that about. Can you explain it to me?
To you, Mr. Mayor. So we were going off of all the bylaws that were listed on our website under frequently asked bylaws, frequently requested bylaws, and that was one of the bylaws there. So we did include it, but there will be a report in Q3 to kind of close all that off. So that bylaw will be essentially closed off and cleaned up.
Okay, so frequently requested bylaws are from the public, is that right?
That's on our website. Yes, available.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I'll read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Bothwell, second by Councillor Frake. Resolved that report TC 21-02 dated May 17th, 2021 be received, and that the proposed schedule for the review of frequently referred bylaws to be approved. All in favor? That's carried. Now we move to report 8.1D, report FIN 2113, NPI dividends and hospital funding strategy. CAO.
Yeah, Mel will be providing that.
All right,
Thank you.
Melanie, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Jordan. So good evening, Council. So I wanted to just provide some remarks on this report. I think it's a really good news story, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak to it. So the intent of the report in front of you this evening is to share two pieces of good news on the financial front. The first one relates to the West Niagara Hospital. So there's been a recent announcement that the total local contribution for the West Niagara Hospital has been reduced from 60 million to 50 million. And so given this new information, we've been able to look at what that impact would be to the town's contribution, which is planned to be made in 2024. And we were originally planning to have to contribute 11.8 million, and we're down to 9.3 million with this announcement. So that's really great news. The existing hospital funding strategy, which has been transparent and well communicated through your previous budget processes, was to gradually build up enough funds in our base budget over 4 years so that when 2024 came along, we could cover the annual debt repayments for the next 30 years once the hospital was built. So we have been working towards that strategy. We contributed in 2020 and we contributed in 2021, but we're not there yet, even with this reduction in contribution. We still have a ways to go, but obviously this announcement does help us, and it can reduce what we were previously planning on increasing our levies in 2022 and 2023. So we would only have to increase our levy by 57,000 in those 2 years, which represents 0.38% of the tax levy. So that's good news, because that is less than what we would have previously communicated to the public, which is great. So the second piece of information that's in this report to share with you is that Niagara Power Incorporated, which the town owns shares in, recently provided the town with a $1.2 million one-time dividend. And we actually received that check today and brought it straight to the bank and deposited it. So that's great news. The dividend was not something that was planned in the town's 2021 budget, and therefore we can absolutely allocate those funds to reserve. But as I've indicated in my report, I don't think there's an immediate need to allocate those funds today, and we can do that via our 2021 year-end results and transfer report. So since I've joined the town about a month ago, I've had various discussions with senior staff around long-term financial strategy, and I'm wrapping my head around what policies and processes the town has in place. I would recommend that it's appropriate to consider how best to allocate these funds in alignment with the review of all of our reserve balances and with our 2022 budget strategy, which would allow us to consider things holistically and all of the town's needs, including what I understand to be a known gap in our asset management strategy. And I believe Council received a presentation on our overall infrastructure and our asset management gap leading into the 2021 budget process. So I think that's very real and something that we need to continue to keep top of mind. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to consider how to incorporate this into our 2022 budget strategy. So those are some of my opening comments. Absolutely open to answering any questions or taking comments from Council as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Councillor Frake.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. Hi, Melanie. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Good news about the hospital. Absolutely fantastic news. So that's good for the town and good for the hospital as well. Fantastic. I just want go roll down to Niagara Power. The $1 million, not the 180,000, I think is like almost like an annual dividend we get from GPI, basically. But the $1 million, I'd like to see that $1 million protected and put into an account for us to discuss at the next budget meeting for next year. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're suggesting?
So through the mayor, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. But I'm suggesting we wait to decide what to do with that and line that up with our 2021 year-end results and our 2022 budget process. So the fact that we received the cash today, we are obviously going to deposit that cash and we're going to invest any surplus cash that we have. But we don't need to decide today which reserve or which project we're going to put that towards. It would basically be reported in our results for 2021. And then at 2021 year end, in conjunction with your budget process, we would put some options on the floor for council to consider and direct that to a specific reserve at that time with more of a fulsome review of all the financial pieces that are going on with the town.
Yeah, I'm just concerned. We have our budget in place for this ensuing year. So I'd like to see that $1 million really protected so that we can deal with it the next budget level. And, you know, like everybody hands off kind of thing. I don't want to see it dwindle into different projects over the next year. It's $1 million we didn't know we were going to have. We've got it written in the budget. So let's make sure that we protect it and when we get to the next budget, we decide how we're going to spend that money. That was one thing. I did have, did you want to comment on that or?
I guess I was going to say, so you're exactly right. This was an unbudgeted amount. So there's not $1 million in the budget. So the fact that we've received this $1 million now absolutely does protect it. It's not been allocated to anybody's budget. Nobody can spend it in 2021 because it's not part of an approved budget. So I do think that the mechanisms in place, because you already have an approved 2021 budget that does not include this, does in essence protect it as you're looking forward to and then build it into a future strategy.
Okay, thank you for that answer. There's one thing I want to bring to your attention, which I'm a little bit concerned about, and that is we've noted in the report the something that was actually agreed under NDA with the buyer of the biodigester, that we would not mention the numbers, that asset value from last year. So I see it's noted in here, so it's out there now, but I think we were under some kind of an NDA not to mention that number. And I'll point towards Councillor Vardy, because I know she's on the MPI board and maybe she can comment a little more on that. Other than that, Melanie, thank you for the report. Is that okay if Leanne speaks to that, or Councillor Vardy?
Councillor Vardy?
Yeah, I just want to say that Councillor Frake is correct. That's information that that should not have been released publicly. So I just want to caution you to be very careful. It's in the public domain now, and you know, that could be really quite detrimental to us in the future when we're looking at NPI. So while it might seem like a small oversight, it could have an incredibly negative impact. So it is quite disturbing to see it there. So, but it's done now. So I don't know what we can do about it. I don't know if Councillor Frake wanted to
provide some context that might help if that's appropriate through the mayor. So perhaps it's just the wording there. So the number that's referenced in this report is the number that was publicly published in your audited financial statements on December 31st, 2019. So this number is out there. It's the value of the investment in Niagara NPI on December 31st, 2019. It's not anything outside of what would have been included in your consolidated financial statements. So if the concern is that we're quoting different market values or other things, that's absolutely not what's happening. And if the wording in this report suggests that, I think it's important to clarify. This is the accounting value on your financial statements of that investment. And it is a public number that is on your website today.
All right. Can I continue on with my questions, Mayor Jordan?
Yes, you were next on the floor, so you're on the floor now.
As you can see, and this is probably what provoked this report, is that I had put forward a motion to have this $1 million set aside for the hospital, because that is, one of the town's major priorities. My concern, last year we had a surplus of $1 million, and it was, quote, parked into various reserves, probably never to be seen again. And who knows what it's been used for, which is one of the reasons why, we've been asking for certain details on some financial transactions with respect to certain terminations. And so it worries me that that $1 million might have been used for a purpose other than what it was supposed to be. And in any case, that last $1 million surplus was just parked. We weren't making any decisions about it, but we haven't heard any more about it this year. So I'd like to know, for one, I'd like to put forward an information request as to how that $1 million has been used, if any of it has been used with respect to our reserves, because that's where it was parked. Secondly, my big concern here, Melanie, is that I don't want this $1 million to get frittered away on this and that in small projects. So if it's truly the intention to park that money and not park it in any reserves, because then we just lose track of it, but to park it and protect it where it can be talked about perhaps in the next budget. But I really would like to see it kind of outside of whatever kind of operational activities go on this year. And I think that's really important. I think we owe that to the community. I mean, this is money that has come from the sale of the biodigester. And it's the final accounting of the money that we've received for that sale. So it is not just shouldn't be put into our general operational funds. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Cadwell.
Yes, excuse me. Thank you, Mayor Jordan, and thank you very much for the report, Melanie. And I definitely agree with your comments in that. I'm just going to reflect back to 2017 when the city of St. Catharines Hydroelectric Company gave the city of St. Catharines a $4 million dividend. It was a one-time dividend under Mayor Senzik and the council, and that's what they did too. They put the money aside for a short term, for whatever term it was, and to decide to make the right decisions with that money. As Melanie mentioned, that money will not be used because it was not part of the 2021 budget. So I'm very confident and very comfortable with the report from our interim treasurer. Thank you.
Councillor Vane.
Hi, a couple of questions. Thank you. First of all, I'm a little confused on one thing. Councillor Freak said that Councillor Vardy is still on the NPI board. I thought all the GEI members had stepped down in April because this was all cleaned up in December, is my understanding. That was the resolution we passed. Has that not been done? So then we're not following the resolution we passed previously? Is that correct?
Councillor Vardy, do you want to comment? I think you're muted.
I'm not aware of any resolution that was passed in that regard. So I'm no longer on the GEI board, but I was appointed to the NPI board. So,
as were the other three councillors, but we passed a motion when we did put that appointment to the NPI until April at the latest. And the town clerk, if you could verify this for me, I'd appreciate it. but I think we're in violation of one of our own motions if that's the case. It was very clear. It was only
I don't
mentioned-
think so, but
That's fine.
happy to have the clerk look it up.
Sure. Because if that's the case, we're paying extra directors for not, that we didn't intend to have on there. That was my,
Well,
and the
for the
second,
record, I don't get paid.
but there's 3 other counselors that were on GEI as well.
Well, right now there's 2 other counselors. Are you talking about GEI or GPI? I think you have to be really clear because I'm not sure what you're referring to when you're talking about 3 other counselors.
When we sold the company, we passed a motion saying that the counselors on GPI would go on NPI until such time as the biodigester, which was completed in December, but we allowed it to go on until April 18th of this year. So if they're still on there, then we need to correct that because we have a motion and the clerk can dig it up.
Well, have the clerk dig it up. First of all, there weren't counselors, but of the people who were on GEI, GEI, 2 of them have since left, and there's only 2 remaining that are on NPI, and I continue on NPI.
Okay, Delight DeVoli, when she came in and made her presentation about the biodigester wrapping up, she specifically said, we are on till April 18th, as per the motion. So
or GEI.
No, I'm talking about the GPI board members that got transferred to NPI.
The GEI, okay. Well, they didn't get transferred. They got appointed. There's a difference. I'm sorry, Councillor Vane, there is a difference.
Okay, I'm aware of that, and that's why I'm saying instead of us debating this, because I know for a fact what I'm saying is correct, I would ask the clerk to look it up so that we can correct this immediately. So, Town Clerk, if you wouldn't mind looking up the meeting where we put the people on the NPI board temporarily, I'd like to know that. Also, we can leave that one till after. That was just caught me off guard. That's all. The other comment is
I don't believe you're correct, though, Councillor Vane. Even though you believe to be correct, I don't believe you are.
Okay, I know you're incorrect, so let's just leave it at that. Now, as far as the $1 million, whether we spend this on infrastructure or we put it towards the hospital to reduce the payment this year, we're still pushing money down the
Point
road.
of order. To say I believe you're incorrect is a little bit insulting.
So some of the comments
say I don't believe you're correct, but to say
There's far too much
you're-
crosstalk
just
right
wanted
now,
to-
Councillor Vardy.
I mean, it's interesting that some counselors always get offended, but yet they have no problem attacking other counselors. So I'm not going to.
Councillor Vane, that's your first warning.
Okay, you know what? It's funny you would bring that up. See, this called Robert's Rules. Read it what it says about penalizing people. You don't have that right. Anyways, having said that, because I specifically looked that up because you always seem to be picking on 5 counselors for some reason. But it's interesting. But anyways, all that aside, I'm talking about the $1 million at this point. All I'm saying is if we use it towards a hospital now and lower the payments, we're still pushing things like infrastructure down the road. So we're not doing any favors to any of the taxpayers because 20 years down the road, their taxes are going to go through the roof because our infrastructure is failing so quickly. And this is happening in every town, every city across the province. So we need to really consider that. And I'm fully support what Melanie said and Councillor Frake, that we leave it to the budget year. And I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with it. I'm just saying we just have to think it through. That's all I'm saying on that particular point. The rest we can discuss offline. Thank you.
The clerk has who's on what boards for clarification.
Clarification is the motion that was done in the beginning, which the motion specifically said April 18th, 2021, all the people who were on GPI that got appointed to NPI in order to finish the biodigester sale, which finished in December, as per Delight DeVoli, and as per Delight DeVoli's own comment that as of April 18th, these board members were supposed to be removed from NPI. So why are we paying for something that we haven't authorized? The motion is very, very clear. and I will get the motion pulled, and I will be glad to bring it out publicly in the next meeting.
Sarah?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on the meeting of January 21st, there was a resolution stating, resolved that council, having given due considerations to the committees, make the following changes to the following boards of directors effective immediately. And for Niagara Power, I have Kurt Whitnell, Jeff Jordan, and Glenn King.
Who is on the board currently? Because according to Councillor Vardy, there's her and two other former members of GPI still. The previous motion prior to that, when GPI was closed down at the time of the sale, a motion was passed so that GPI members could stay on to finish the completion of the sale and get by everything, which was April the 18th. That's what I need clarification on, is that former motion.
May I have a point of order?
CAO?
Mayor, could we take this? This isn't what we're discussing in the report. This motion. So can we look into it, the clerk and I?
Yes, that would be great. So, because we are getting far off topic. Seeing no further questions, just need a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, second by Councillor Sharp. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, second by Councillor Sharp, resolved that report FIN 21-13 dated May 17th, 2021 be received for information. All in favor? That's carried. Oh. All right, we're at resolution 8.2A, MPI dividends. Yep. Councillor Vardy, this was your notice of motion from last week or 2 weeks from May 3rd.
Thank you.
Do you want to speak now, or do you want Councillor Sharp while he's taking his hand down? So you go ahead.
In light of the discussion, I think we've all come to agreement that the money should be protected. And if that's the case, then I'll withdraw my motion.
All right. There's no discussion. So the motion's been withdrawn, so there's no discussion. Next, we move to resolution 11.3, parking over 16-hour limit. Councillor Vardy?
Can I suggest we defer that motion till we get more information from staff?
Yes, so you're a mover for a deferral, and you have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Bothwell?
Just a point of inquiry, Mayor Jordan. Are we deferring this or referring this to staff?
I said defer. You get some more information from the region first, is what I'm thinking. So deferring it.
Okay. So moved by Councillor Frake, second by Councillor Bothwell, resolved that the item regarding parking over 16-hour time limit be deferred for a staff report. All in favor?
Point of clarity, Mayor Jordan. If we refer it to staff, it's referred, not deferred. There's a difference, can we? So we would refer it
Yes.
to staff.
So Councillor Frank, you want it referred to staff?
Yes, let's refer it. I'm getting tired.
All
Thank
right.
Point of
Perfect,
order,
same
Mr.
thing,
Mayor?
but it's just
Sorry.
letter R.
Go ahead, Councillor Sharp. A point of order about this. A resident raised this concern to me about this when we tried to stop the bylaw from issuing penalties for signs and stuff. Somebody said to me, we don't have the legal right any more than regional council has a legal right to tell NRP what to do. And we have no legal right to tell bylaw what to do and what not to do. So I'm just curious as to whether we're wasting staff's time if there's no legality here, because technically the argument that was given to me was very good. NRP, the regional council can't tell them to go out and do more jaywalking tickets or whatever. It's just not legal. We have a bylaw in place. We can't tell them how to enforce a bylaw. Just my point that I heard, that's all.
Well, then it'll be a very short staff report, so that'll be easy. Moved by Councillor Frake, second by Councillor Bothwell, resolved that the item regarding parking over 16-hour time limit be referred for a staff report. All in favor? That's carried. Now we move to section 12, notice of motion. Introduction date, May 17th, 2021, Advance Green, Main Street at Nellis Road. Requested by Councillor Vardy, whereas the safety of residents is of utmost concern, whereas within the last few years, the intersection of Nellis Road, Main Street East has undergone extensive modifications, including the relocation and replacement of all traffic signals, whereas all 4 routes into said intersection of Main and Nellis have left turn lanes clearly marked and maintained to align traffic flow straight through traffic unimpeded access through this intersection, whereas traffic volume has consistently increased so much that left turners exiting from either direction on Main Street to Nellis Road must usually wait until the light turns yellow in order to complete their turn or risk a potentially dangerous quick maneuver crossing in from oncoming traffic. Whereas on Main Street, particularly east of Nellis Road, this congestion frustrates those seeking to enter the flow of Main Street from the numerous businesses and private entrances, whereas there is a significant pedestrian traffic at the intersection and 2 schools in the immediate vicinity. Be it resolved that council take all necessary actions to make the intersection vehicle and pedestrian safe by requesting that the region to install advanced green signals on Main Street and visual pedestrian signals and crossing request buttons at each corner. I acknowledge that this notice of motion will be given consideration at the June 7th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting. Yeah. We need a mover and seconder for the request by Pride Niagara for flag raising at Town Hall on June 1st.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Vardy. And seconder, Councillor Frake. Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Frake. Resolved that the request by Pride Niagara for flag raising at Town Hall on June 1st, 2021 be approved. All in favor? That's carried. Yeah. All right, now we have the rest of the correspondence. Need a mover and, Councillor Bothwell.
I would like to lift the Town of Pelham resolution on the Planning Act timelines for separate consideration, please.
All right. That'll be noted. And so we'll need a mover and seconder to receive the other correspondence. Mover and seconder, Councillor Frake, seconder, Councillor Dunstall. Moved by Councillor Frank, second by Councillor Dunstall. Resolved that the correspondence under Administration and Finance pertaining to Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority Board meeting highlights March 19th, 2021. Town of Lincoln resolution regarding climate change adaptation plan and crisis. City of Welland support an NPCA initiative to form partnerships with municipalities to enhance trail connections. Be received. All in favor? That's carried. Yeah. Councillor Bothwell, I have you as the mover of the lifted correspondence. So did you want to speak first or?
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. It's just that I'm looking to seek council's endorsement of Pelham's correspondence. They are supporting the City of Kitchener's correspondence, and I'm not sure how the clerk would word this, but Pelham received the correspondence from the City of Kitchener regarding Planning Act timelines, and they endorsed and supported the resolution from the City of Kitchener regarding the Planning Act timelines. What it is in essence is saying is that Bill 139, as we've heard from our planning staff, puts some significant changes to the timelines for completion of Planning Act matters. So for official plan amendments where a developer or an applicant submits it, council has to make their decision within 120 days, where before it was 210 days. So it's almost half the amount of time for a council to make a decision on it. And with zoning bylaw amendments, it was reduced from 150 days as well to 3 months, 90 days, a significant difference. And from 6 months to 4 months for plans of subdivision. And we've heard that these timelines from our planning staff, as well as the impacts to our heritage timelines on having considerations of things that come up within those matters. It just for the having one meeting a month or whatever, it's just impossible from the receipt of a submission, complete submission, to come to these decision-making points. So the City of Kitchener has asked the province to roll it back to the previous Bill 108, where Bill 108 reduced it from those in Bill 139. So they're asking to roll it back to the previous timelines. So I think that gives the breathing room that council needs and planning staff need in order to best vet those development applications that come to us. Right now, I think what we're hearing is there's no way we can meet those timelines, and it basically is a rubber stamp for a developer to say, well, council didn't make a decision and going to LPAT for a non-decision even before we've had a chance to fully discuss. So I'd like to say, I don't know if anyone else has any questions or concerns about that, but my concern is that I'm supporting Pelham's resolution and the City of Kitchener's resolution, and I'm hopeful that council will also send that message the same as Pelham has and circulate it appropriately. So I'm asking if the clerk could draft that motion for council to endorse Pelham's correspondence. Thank you.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just wondering if our planning director could make a comment on that, just to give us some feedback on those timelines. Thank you.
Antonetta.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, good evening. Thank you. Yes, we would be very agreeable to that as planning staff, to ask in support of Kitchener and Pelham for an extension of those timelines to revert them back to Bill 139. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Bothwell, second by Councillor Frank. Resolved that the correspondence under planning and development pertaining to the Town of Pelham Planning Act timelines be endorsed. All in favor?
Can you say, sorry, Mayor, and can you say and circulated to the appropriate parties as per the, because I'd like it circulated.
Yep.
as well. Thank you.
And I just added endorsed and circulated to the appropriate authorities. All in favor? That's carried. The next meeting of the Committee of the Whole is scheduled for June 7th, 2021 at 6 p.m. So note the time, it's half an hour earlier. And that's everything for Committee of the Whole. So good night, everyone. And council will start at 10 p.m. Thank you. Good night. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the the Town of Grimsby Council agenda, or council for a meeting for Monday, May 17th, 2021. First, we'll start with playing in the national anthem. So all rise. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Move to approval of the agenda. Need a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Dunstall. Second by Councillor Cadwell. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, second by Councillor Cadwell. Resolved that the agenda for the council meeting of May 17th, 2021 be approved. All in favor? That's carried. Up next, we have adoption of the previous minutes, Committee of the Whole minutes from May 3rd, 2021, and council minutes from May 3rd, 2021. Need a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Ritchie, second by Councillor Vardy. Moved by Councillor Ritchie, second by Councillor Vardy. Resolved that the Committee of the Whole minutes of May 3rd, 2021 be approved. That the council minutes of May 3rd, 2021 be approved. All in favor? That's carried. Need a mover and seconder to read the bylaws for the first time. Councillor Bothwell, Councillor Frank. Moved by Councillor Bothwell, second by Councillor Frank. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaws 21-33 to 21-35 inclusive, and the same be read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. Need a mover and seconder for the second and third reading. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, second by Councillor Cadwell. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, second by Councillor Cadwell. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaws 21-33 to 21-35 inclusive, read a first time, now be read a second and third time, and finally passed, and the mayor and the town clerk to sign and seal the same, and the rule council to the contrary notwithstanding. All in favor? That's carried. Any announcements? Councillor Bothwell?
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I'm not sure if someone else was going to speak to this, but I just wanted to bring the public, make the public aware of the Paul Harris Fellow Virtual Recognition event being hosted by the Rotary Club of Grimsby this Thursday, May the 20th at 7 p.m. It is a public meeting, and the community is encouraged to participate by Zoom. If you want to contact them on the Rotary website, you can get the Zoom link to participate. The people who are being recognized that have made significant contributions to the quality of life in Grimsby and West Niagara include Ken Boychuk, who was over 30 years, I think he's been very involved with the Grimsby Author Series, and he's being recognized. Tony Josie is being recognized for his involvement with supporting the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital rebuild. Bruce McKenzie is being recognized for his environmental work with the Bigar Lagoons wetlands. And Jeanette Murphy is being recognized as Rotarian for her as assistant district governor. So I think it's going to be a really interesting evening on Thursday, May 20th at 7 p.m. To see these people get recognized with the Paul Harris Fellow Recognition event. The other thing, just to mention again, because of Ken Boychuk's involvement with the Grimsby Public Library Author Series, is the next author series that's coming up is May 31st at 7 p.m. via Zoom. The tickets are $10 per person, and the presenters, the authors that are presenting are Edward Rutherford, who's speaking on his book called China, and Paula McLean on When the Stars Goes Dark. So I would encourage anyone who hasn't yet had the great experience of listening to authors speaking. It's just we used to get 200 people attending. It's phenomenal. So you can go on the Grimsby Public Library website to look into buying the tickets to that event. And again, that's May 31st at 7 p.m. via Zoom. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bothwell. It's nice to see certainly Ken Boychuk, among others, to get the recognition. I was on council back in 1998 when the author series actually started with Ken. So I was on the I was on the inaugural committee for the author series. So it's really nice to see how it's continued and grown over the years. So. And it's nice to have it virtual, and it would be even nicer to get it back to in person. So, and along with Tony Josie, Bruce McKenzie, and Jeanette Murphy, I know them all. So thank you. That's very good. Quite the accomplishments. Councillor Cadwell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jordan. Just as everybody's aware, our main street was shut down for a few hours this morning. I want to give a big, huge shout out to town staff and working with the region too, getting the Jersey barriers put in place for the extension of the patio season when our government decides to lift the lockdown, and hopefully that'll be soon. We'll be able to, for the businesses, the restaurants, to enjoy the outdoor dining anyway. So again, I think that's great that the staff has moved very quickly on this. So when the announcement does come, the restaurant entrepreneurs, it's almost like shovel in the ground. They can just jump right at, just get set up and reap the benefits of their businesses with the outdoor patios. So again, thank you very much, staff. Great work. Thank you.
And just to further that, the stay-at-home order has been extended to June 2nd. So hopefully June 2nd it is lifted and the barriers or in the patios can be up and running on the 2nd. Fingers crossed. Seeing no further announcements, our next meeting at council is scheduled for June 7th, 2021, following the committee of the whole meeting. Now we're going to move into closed session. I just need to read the closed session electronic participation declaration. Good evening, members of council. Before we begin the closed session, all members are reminded that any discussions in closed session are to remain confidential as per our procedural bylaw and our code of conduct for the council of the town of Grimsby. Before we begin, I need each member that is attending electronically to confirm the following: that you understand the matters are to remain confidential, confirm that no one else is present with you, confirm that no one else can hear this closed session, confirm that you are not using any electronic devices other than your tablet or computer for the purposes of this video conferencing only, confirm that you are not recording any portion of the meeting. If you acknowledge to all of the above, please reply with "I understand" and confirm to all the statements. Councillor Bothwell?
I understand and confirm to all the statements.
Councillor Dunstall?
I understand and confirm to all the statements.
Councillor Frake?
I understand and confirm to all the statements.
Councillor Cadwell?
I understand and confirm to all the statements.
Councillor Ritchie?
I understand and confirm to all of the statements.
Councillor Sharp?
I understand and confirm to all except the electronic.
Councillor Bain?
I understand and confirm to all the statements.
Councillor Vardy?
I understand and confirm to all the statements.
And myself, I understand and confirm to all the statements. So we're moving into closed session under section 2392B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, public library appointment. And then we have closed session minutes of April 19th, April 26th, and May 3rd. Mover and seconder to meet and to close. Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Vardy. Moved by Councillor Ritchie, second by Councillor Vardy. Resolved that council meet in closed session regarding the following: section 2392, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, public library board appointment. All in favor to going into closed? And that's carried. Good night, everyone. Are we back in? Okay. All right, we need a mover and seconder now that we're back in open to proceed with the closed session direction with the library. Need a mover and seconder, Councillor Bothwell, Councillor Vardy. Moved by Councillor Bothwell, second by Councillor Vardy. Resolved that staff proceed as directed in closed session with regard to public library appointment. All in favor? That's carried. Need a mover and seconder for first reading. Moved by Councillor Bain. Seconder, Councillor Cadwell. Moved by Councillor Bain, second by Councillor Cadwell. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaw 21-36 and that same be read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. Need a mover and seconder for second and third reading. Councillor Bothwell, Councillor Vardy. Moved by Councillor Bothwell, second by Councillor Vardy. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaw 21-36 read a first time, now be read a second time and third time and finally passed, and the mayor and town clerk do sign and seal the same and rule council to the contrary notwithstanding. All in favor? That's carried. Meeting is adjourned. Good night, everyone.